Yo, what's up, Sophia? How's it going?
Hello, everything's going good. Can't complain.
Good. This is like my favorite time of the week, man, where I get to talk about the fun stuff, man, instead of all the bullshit
Yes,
we have
I
to talk
know.
about, man. Damn, you know. Hope everybody's doing
So
good
how
out
you been
there.
this last week?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. Just doing the same thing. Looking forward to today's show, and I discovered some juicy new videos that we can go over later on regarding you know, um a debate actually between Michael Endor, who's a Christian dualist, and a brand new idealist person who I guess converted over to idealism from materialism. Both of these guys are neuroscientists. So this ought to be pretty interesting because they go through that. I haven't really watched the whole thing, so it's kind of new. So this will be kind of like a live react we can do because I don't think you've seen it either. I think it just came out this morning,
No,
actually.
I haven't watched it.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna check
Okay,
that
cool.
out. But in the
Scott, what I want to
meantime,
tell you real
hmm
quick is
hmm go ahead.
I'm gonna turn my camera off because I'm having a serious lag.
Yeah. I
Just to
noticed
let
the
you know.
lag. It's all good, man. It is all good. So yeah, so today we have the topic, about the science of mysticism. We kind of talked about that a little bit before, and so we kind of wanted to go over that because a lot of people um maybe don't understand mysticism. Some people don't understand science. Some people don't understand both. But we just wanted to kind of talk about it. I mean, it was a topic you kind of brought up and one that I haven't really investigated that thoroughly, but this is kind of cool for a discussion because we're just bringing it up. Maybe the audience has some ideas and things they want to talk about. This is 100% call-in, so we'll take call-ins a little later on. And you guys can join, share your thoughts and stuff like that. All that good stuff. Um, but yeah, I've been looking at the idea behind it, the science of mysticism, and from everything I understand, right? Like mysticism is kind of like a science in itself, like from what I understand, a lot of mystical teachings um have sort of a similar approach. Maybe some of it is distinct in their methodologies, but they do share like notable commonalities, like the quest for understanding reality, the underlying nature of reality. So stuff like empirical basis and observations, like mysticism, as you know, because you're a mystic yourself. So mystics really rely on meditative insights or introspection, intuition, you
Intuition.
know, yeah, this knowledge and understanding that's
Yeah,
like
it's very
primary knowledge.
intuitive.
Yeah, it's real intuitive. Um, so in that way, it's a little bit different. It's kind of like perceiving deeper levels of reality
It's
through
more like
spiritual experience,
if I would I would say that scientists focus on objective reality and observe it and study it and test it and whatever, whereas
hmm
mystics they observe from within. They go into the inner world, and I think that it's not that mysticism is science because science obviously was invented, but a lot of concepts of what mystics believe to be the underlying reality are now being confirmed, especially in quantum physics.
Exactly. Oh, Paul jumped in. He says, "I'm sharing my thoughts, Scott, telepathically. I'll ask later what number I was sending you. Oh, cool. You are always the funny dude, aren't you there, Paul? No, I'm just kidding. No, I love Paul, man. And Caleb says he loves him some science. So, we can talk about whatever. Like you said that with quantum physics, there's like an intersect or an overlap with mysticism. Explain that a little
Yeah,
bit.
with the
Uh-huh.
observer effect and things like, quantum entanglement. Those things already existed within mysticism. Like, in
Mm.
other words, we already knew that, that everything is interconnected.
Yeah. Like with modern physics, they delve into the atomic and subatomic realms, which are sort of like beyond
Yes,
the reach of our ordinary senses. And so in that case, they require
yes.
specialized instruments and theories to comprehend it, like mathematics. But you're saying like mystics have a different way of actually coming to that same sort of conclusion.
Yeah, I'm just saying that modern science is confirming a lot of stuff that mystics already knew.
Oh yeah.
And there are a lot of so-called, you know, I'm just saying, like, if mystics knew things thousands and thousands of years ago that we're just now confirming with science, I mean, to me, that's concrete proof that the underlying reality can be accessed, even though it's limited
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
in different
yeah,
ways, other than conventional science. That's my point.
right. Exactly. So it's like kind of like insights into interconnectedness.
Yes, but it can be done, without what we call conventional science. It doesn't have to be in a laboratory, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we don't need gatekeepers to tell us the nature of reality.
Right,
We
right,
can
right.
we can access it on our own, which keeps us, spiritually sovereign.
Mm-hmm. And this would probably be a good
You know what
time
I'm
to kind
saying?
of break down like what do you mean by spiritual when you talk about spiritual? What are you referring to in that case?
The quest of, understanding reality, that's being spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's just about what we can see, then why are we on such a quest to figure out more stuff? Like, what are we trying to figure out? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if a scientist, what is he after? What is he trying to learn? He wants to learn the nature of reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So like
So
mi-
if
so
if
like
what we can see, if what we can see, and what we,
go ahead, there's
sorry,
just a
I mean,
lag.
I'm
Yeah, there's
saying, what
such a lag, yeah.
objective reality, like, if that's all there is to reality, then why are we still seeking?
Mm-hmm.
What are we seeking?
Fundamental truths.
Anyone have an answer to that?
Yeah, like the way I understand it, like mystical experience, like I've had them through psychedelic experiences, like mystical experiences that lead to like a profound sense of oneness and fundamental interconnectedness between myself and others, life forms in the universe. Whereas science, through its exploration of the natural world, also sort of reveals these intricate interconnectedness on various systems like biological ecosystems to the cosmos, like the vastness of the cosmos. And then, like you said, quantum mechanics, entanglement, non-locality, these sort of things all kind of point to
Right.
that same truth, and I think we can acknowledge the limits of human understanding. Like mystics often describe their experiences as ineffable, meaning they're sort of private, so it's difficult to express in ordinary language. And with science, modern science acknowledges that there's certain things that we can never know, even in principle, about the so-called physical world, revealing its inherent complexity and mystery. And this is what I think we're talking about when we say direct access to reality. that even scientists, whether you're materialist or not, we can all sort of acknowledge the limits of our human understanding, even in principle. So, despite like the different methods between mysticism and science, they can kind of be seen as complementary partners because of that. Because we're in search for a deeper understanding of reality. So while science provides like objective evidence and analysis, like the mystical experiences seem to offer like a subjective insight and wisdom you get from the internal. And this can sort of just enrich our understanding of ourselves and the universe, maybe be like a complementary sort of practice, because they all sort of converge on the same truth, right?
Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, scientists are searching for the same thing that mystics discovered. And
Yeah.
if objective reality is all there is, then it would end there, And that's true, Al Hardy. I mean, even scientists come to the realization that they're searching for some type of subjective truth,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your truth. And there's been, at least traditionally, and I did a video on that too about the search for truth. And a lot of science would say, well, the only thing that really has any meaning is not subjective truth, but it's going to be things we can all verify objectively. Like we should be able, if it can't be verified, then it really has no meaning at all. There's no meaning to things we can't objectively verify. But this principle itself can't be verified. So again, this can also be sort of a subjective thing too, even when you talk about that. Paul says, remove the subjective from science and no science is left. Right. That's what I'm getting at, is that verification principle itself is sort of self-refuting. But it doesn't mean that it has no value. Like to
Yeah, it
me,
kind of challenges its own.
yeah, it can converge, like we say, if you
It
find
has.
objective truths that converge on the subjective, you may have a truth.
I mean, of course it's valid and it's important, but in a way, science kind of challenges its own premise because, like, every time you zoom far enough in or out, then you kind of realize that this stable, objective reality somehow dissolves, and then
Hmm.
you're left wondering.
Yeah. Caleb asks, can you verify why kids love to taste the cinnamon toast crunch? I think that um that's actually a good question though. But I can imagine a materialist or physicalist would say it's the taste receptors in children are more sensitive or something, or for evolutionary reasons are always looking for something that's going to increase their energy. And so their taste buds are going to look for sweetness. Like that's why kids love sweet stuff. That may be the story that they tell roughly. I'm not trying to, I may be wrong about that, but it seems like that would be something they would say. They'd point to some evolutionary thing, but it's just the experience itself of the sweetness is the thing that can't really be explained by the materialist story. Because, why should there be an experience along with it? All of this stuff could go on principally in the dark, so to speak, like a machine or any other thing. Like even our internal organs, they say, are not conscious, but yet they react. They're aware. They react to things. But they're not necessarily conscious. But I think maybe they could be. We're just not. We're just disassociated from the consciousness of our organs. So maybe that is the function of consciousness, but it's an open question. That's the thing.
I'm still here, Scott. Give me a second.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, so I mean, I think that science and mysticism, in many ways, are converging, and they may have different reasons though for why the intersection happens. But I don't know if mystics necessarily look for the attribution of the experience. From what I understand from the mystics I've ever spoken to, including Sophia, it's the experience itself, it's the impression that it leaves is where the value is, because it's ineffable. It's not something you can really describe in terms of mathematics or even any language for that matter. Whereas science is trying to do that. They're really trying to treat reality as this objective thing that we can look at, like the behaviors of the world, and sort of come to a truth about nature by looking at the behavior, but it sort of discounts the inner world. So you have a lot of panpsychists that say actually everything does have an inner world. It goes along with it, and that's sort of supposed to answer the question of consciousness. Why and how does consciousness arise? To have that inner experience that sort of works with awareness and evolution. That evolution is sort of driven by some sort of will, some sort of awareness or consciousness, or some form of proto consciousness, whatever that means, that provides a will for advancement and survival and trying to adapt, rather than just be some inert piece of matter that is kicked around. And people say, well, that environmental pressure is just enough to push things in the right direction, to create survival mechanisms and things like that. But upon closer inspection, some people say it doesn't work. There's a lot of arguments against that, you know. And so you have to sort of marry this weird consciousness thing with this physical thing, which leads to a dualism, like a dualistic sort of reality. So that there's consciousness that provides its function for this other thing called materiality, or the physical. So these are two real things that have standalone existence that work together. But the way a monist would view it is that everything is either material or everything is conscious. Those are the two options we have. That's the dichotomy that we know about. We know of inner conscious experience, but we also know about objective reality, like the physical objects, the content of our consciousness, if you will. And so people
Yeah, but
who are
all I'm saying
monists,
is,
they
what
fall
I'm
in
saying is,
either one of those camps. Go ahead.
right, but the point that I keep trying to stress is that if objective reality was complete and final, then science would be over. And the fact that scientists are still searching, what does that tell us?
Yeah, we don't know. We have to learn. So there's more
What are
out
we
there
learning
to
if
discover.
objective reality is all there is?
Right.
What are we just we're just learning what mechanisms and how. I
The
mean,
behaviors.
there's obviously more to it. There's certain, yeah.
Yeah, the behaviors. That's the limitation. And I think that's any good theory will define its boundary constraints, and that's one of the boundary constraints with science, is that they'll never really know the inner world of something. They'll only know the behavior, what they can see objectively, as if their perceptions are the portal into absolute truth, or at least part of it. And then from there, you can sort of infer, what the metaphysic really is, or the ontology of what it is. And I think because of our rejection through the Enlightenment, we had a big rejection of religion, in the Catholic Church in particular. And so you had these natural philosophers, as they call them, that the church allowed, and they sort of started to investigate the objective nature. And they weren't allowed to ask questions about the inner world. That was the job of the church to do that, you know. And so that was off limits. And then
And why do
as
you think?
science, well, I was going to say, as science progressed, um, you know, they started saying that we may not really need church at all. We may not need God. We don't need the spirit world. We don't need anything. We're so successful at manipulating reality and predicting reality that what do we need the spirit world for?
Right. Materialism.
Yeah. Cafe says, for instance, the psilocybin-induced mystical experience research that's being elaborated at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. I guess he was asking Al Harding or somebody. I don't know. But yeah, that would be an interesting later on, maybe Cafe, if you can jump on and kind of elaborate on what you're elaborating about. And that'd be interesting discussion. Because the mystical experience, I do agree with Cafe, and I've had, you know, he's been on the show a couple times, and he oftentimes talks about the commonalities around the world regarding the mystical experience, that people from diverse cultures, religions, you know, this perennialist philosophy, that there's this common truth among all mystics, whatever their traditions are, that converge. And you know, and it's kind of like a
Yeah, all
synchronicity.
over the world, and they don't know nothing about each other.
Yeah,
Exactly.
synchronicity. So it's really interesting. Do you have any examples of where you've
So there
learned?
has to be.
Yeah, this lag is crazy. have,
No, I
have
was
you
just
ever
saying there has to be. You think I need to switch to my phone or something?
Yeah, maybe so, because the lag is kind of like too long.
Yeah. Let me get the heck on out of here real quick. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay. No problem, no problem. You know, the good thing about the laptop is that the volume level has really adjusted for you, you know. And so you kind of came out very loud, like using the phone. But now we have this lag, so it's always something, right? It's always a trade-off somewhere. But yeah, Cafe, if you can come on a little later, we can discuss the mystical experiences and things like that if you have the time to do it. I don't know, but that would be really cool, man. But yeah, I find it really interesting, man, about the convergence of all of these things, because I think that's where the value in particular things are really found. You know, the convergence, the commonalities. It's kind of like even with the NDEs, like the near death experiences. I used to you know, interview folks when I was with IANS, you know, the International Association of Near Death Studies. And there are so many commonalities among all these things, you know, that attribution, it may not be glimpses into heaven, it may not be, you know, the impression we think they are, but the experiences are real and the stories do converge, you know. And this is like millions and billions of people around the world. So that'd be really cool to discuss. When I get on, would like to talk about issues mysticism face, because it seems to face some of the same issues that religious experience face. Well, yeah, mystical experiences are very similar to the religious experience, if not the same thing, you know. And we can definitely talk about that, and talk about what mystics actually have to say about that. And Caleb also says, as someone who is on the fence about all this, I believe it's important we talk about these things. Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here to do, man. And speaking of which, unless Sophia, if you had anything else to add to it, I wanted to jump into the video and kind of go into that part before we start bringing folks on, so we can talk about mystical experiences and stuff. You have anything you wanted to add to that?
I just want to make sure I'm not too loud. Am I loud as hell again?
A little bit loud, but It's not that bad. I mean, shoot, people should
Now let me
understand.
log out and see if I can adjust that, and you go ahead with the, the video you want to cover.
Okay, sure. Actually shut it down, so I got to pull it all back up. Uh, this was a video on Michael Shermer's channel. Are you guys in the audience? Are you guys familiar with Michael Shermer? He's a skeptic, and he recently hosted or moderated a debate between Christof Koch, who describes himself as an idealist, and a Christian dualist. You know, they had a debate. I think it came out yesterday, and it was really interesting. The parts that I saw, I didn't see the whole thing. You know, and Christoph Koch is kind of a newly converted over to idealism, from what I understand. 'Cause everything I knew about him, I remember he was a physicalist because he's a neuroscientist, and then he started working with Giulio Tononi regarding panpsychism, which is, I always call it like the close brother or close cousin of idealism. It's like a step away from idealism, and but he never really could go that far. He would just he kind of was sympathetic to panpsychism because it explained the hard problem. And as a neuroscientist, that's sort of his bag, so to speak, you know. But I guess he kind of had some questions about that too. And so, he kind of went full idealism. So it's kind of cool. Caleb says that I'm familiar with him, mostly saw him in the mid 2010s. You talking about Michael Shermer? He debated people like Deepak Chopra. I think he was part of the five horsemen of the new atheist movement. I think he was part of that too. He was one of the horsemen. So he's really big on skepticism. He's really vocal about his atheism. I saw him debate Bernardo Kastrup on idealism. In my view, he lost the debate, but that's just me. But I don't mean that disparagingly of physicalism, because I think physicalism is a pretty natural sort of knee-jerk reaction to interpreting reality. Paul says, I heard of Koch first time when he brought David Chalmers a case of fine wine to sell a 25-year bet. Yeah, that's right. Christof said, within 25 years, we're going to have the answer to consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness will be solved by materialism within 25 years. So they made a bet. David Chalmers says no, because he's like a panpsychist, I guess. And he said, no, that's not going to happen, because in principle, materialism will never solve the problem of consciousness, just on principle. And Christoph Koch said that was just a stupid thing to say. And he goes, I'll go ahead and bet you a bottle of fine wine, like this really expensive wine. So he lost the bet. And now, then he became a panpsychist, and he started working with Giulio Tononi on the integrated information theory, which is like a hard version of panpsychism. But now he just went full idealism. So really interesting evolution in his career. And and of course, just to let y'all know, most of the scientific community has turned their back on Christoph Koch because of that. I think last year the community came out with a scathing letter denouncing not only IIT, integrated information theory, but also Christoph Koch, and it got pretty nasty. So he is controversial, I guess you could say. Cafe says, well, the way I heard of the Four Horsemen is Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dent, Christopher, and Sam Harris met that on their fifth wheel. Yeah. I'm not sure if Michael Shermer's part of that. I've seen him on stage doing a lot of debates and stuff around the same time, maybe even sharing the stage with Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and these guys. So maybe I'm just a little confused on that. But at any rate, I want to get into this debate. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share this so we can all take a look. 1 second. Here we go. And I'll stop it from time to time so I don't get booted off for copyright infringement or whatever in case. But let's roll.
Again, here's the newest book, Then I Am Myself, the World. He was on for that book last year, so he's our returning champion, as it were. All right, Michael, let's start with you. Just kind of broadly speaking, tell us where you're coming from and kind of wend your way to this question that I have for all theists. If to what extent do the arguments and evidence you present in your book from neuroscience?
Okay, guys, never try this new lottery loophole that's gone viral on TikTok unless you're ready to hit your first jackpot in the next.
Hit the jackpot.
Support your beliefs in the afterlife and your Christianity and so on, what we loosely call your faith, such that if you took these away, if Christof came up with such great arguments and he said, "Oh my God, I'm wrong," would you abandon your faith or your religious beliefs, or are these more of just once you have the belief for other reasons, philosophical, theological, or whatever, these are additional good reasons to believe? Anyway, you can get yourself to that question by way of a general background here.
Thank you, Michael. And that's actually a great question. It's one that I've thought about a bit, not quite as explicitly as you ask it, but I've thought about that. Where I'm coming from, I grew up as an atheist and as believing in physicalism and materialism. I was in love with science. I went to medical school. I majored in biochemistry.
A lot of atheists online always say never trust a theist when they tell you they used to be an atheist. Is that true?
I don't know.
Because they only say that so that they can, as a tactic. Have you ever heard it? But I don't think that's necessarily false in this guy's case.
No, it's kind of what they always do in every kind of ideology, even like in the transgender community. You can't trust someone who's detransitioned because they never were a real transgender anyway. And you can't trust a Christian who's no longer a Christian. They were never a real Christian. You know. You know how it is.
Yep. That's Darth Dawkins type shit.
Undergraduate, and I went to medical school and fell in love with neuroscience. I basically spent 4 years with my neuroscience textbooks because I thought it was so beautiful and fascinating, and particularly with neuroanatomy because I thought that we could understand who we are and what life was all about if we understood the brain in detail. I decided that the way I wanted to understand it was to go into neurosurgery and kind of get some firsthand contact there. So I trained in neurosurgery at the University of Miami, and I began at Stony Brook on faculty in 1991, and I've been there ever since. As I went along, I had some religious experiences and a lot of thoughts about that, and had a conversion experience around the year 2000. But along with that, I began seeing things in my clinical practice that really didn't fit the textbooks. It didn't fit what I had learned in medical school. And can we share screens? I've got a scan. I think there's an ability to do it.
That I don't know.
Let me just give it a try. Well,
okay.
Maybe
we've never tried that on the show.
Tell you what, why not? Well, why don't we hold it? All right. Yeah. I've got a very good example is a little girl who was born missing half, 2/3 of her brain. Her head was really full largely of water, of spinal fluid. And I told her parents I was dubious as to how well she would do in life. I didn't think there was much of a chance of her having much function. And I followed her as she grew up, and she's completely normal. She's in her mid-20s now. She's still missing about half her brain. Completely normal person. You speak to her, she's actually rather bright, has a good job, etc. I have a number of patients who are like that. Not everybody is
no
missing.
motor deficits?
Not at all. And it's not that uncommon. Now, of course, she hasn't been studied carefully. We've had MRIs of her brain. I haven't done a functional MRI. I'd love to see what's lighting up when she moves and does things. But there's a lot of water up there, and it's not too much brain. I have a little boy who's now a late teenager who had a similar scenario, also perfectly normal person. I had a young child who had hydranencephaly, which is a condition in which babies are born. They have strokes in intrauterine life, and they're born without cerebral hemispheres. So the highest level of their central nervous system is their diencephalon.
All right, so he's going over patients in his own experience where the brain was compromised, and yet it didn't affect their consciousness too much at all. And so I guess this is supposed to be maybe proof that consciousness doesn't come from the brain.
Right.
It's, you know, that it's the soul that is the consciousness that's not in the brain, but it's outside of time and space. And so it would make sense that no matter what happens to the brain, you know, the consciousness will not be changed at all. But I guess my question is, then why then are there so many counterfactuals to that? Like there's
I'm
people,
about to say, but we also know that that's not the case. So that's
yeah,
really not proof. But like I was trying to explain once before, if you see the brain as just a filter, you know, it all depends on how the brain filters reality. So if your brain is altered or damaged or anything like that, you could see it as the filtering is different now.
Yeah, on that view, it can make sense. But it seems like you were just saying on the view that consciousness has no relation to the brain, then that kind of brings up a lot of issues like why do people get drunk? Why do people get affected
Exactly.
by
If
DMT, for example?
exactly if affecting the brain doesn't, never mind. I have stuff
Well,
going on in the background. Will
I
y'all
hear you.
shut the hell up?
And it's like a lot of people that I've discussed idealism with, I think a lot of people get confused idealists with dualists like that. And they kind of feel like idealists are also in the camp of people who feel like the brain has no role in consciousness at all. And that's really not what idealism is saying, you know, that the
Right.
brain actually has a whole lot to do with consciousness, that if you tweak the brain, you are going to tweak the experience. And so this
But
kind of
that just goes
comes
back to correlation doesn't prove causation. That's what I'm always being told.
right. That's right. That's right. And I think they're going to get into this. And this is why, in a way, when I was watching the video, you wouldn't know the difference if Christof Koch was a strong physicalist, but he's an idealist, yet they argue kind of the same on that point. So this should make it really clear that idealists don't share that dualist view, you know, that soul out there
Mhm.
type of thing, you know. Anyways, I'll continue.
And he had severe cerebral palsy. He was quite handicapped, but totally awake, completely conscious person. He couldn't speak, but he had a full range of emotions, of reactions. He was happy about things and sad about things, and just he had bad cerebral palsy. What really got me to thinking about this dramatically, it was I was doing an awake craniotomy, which occasionally is indicated if we have to map the surface of the brain to protect eloquent regions of the brain. This was a lady who had had an infiltrating tumor of her left frontal lobe. And I wanted to map her Broca's area, the speech area of the left frontal lobe, so I could avoid damaging it as I was taking the tumor out. Because the tumor was infiltrating, I had to take out a good part of the frontal lobe. So I was doing that while I was talking to her. The operation took about 4 or 5 hours, and we had a nice long conversation. And I was talking to her as much of her left frontal lobe was coming out, and she never turned a hair. which is perfectly fine. We're talking about the weather, we're talking about the cafeteria, about her family. And I left the operating room thinking, this isn't in any textbook. I'm not seeing this in Sidman and Sidman or Candel's textbook. I don't see any of this anywhere. So I began looking. I began reading. And one phenomenon that, as a neurosurgeon, is particularly important. This is when I teach the residents. This is something that neurosurgeons have to know intimately, and that is the difference between eloquent and non-eloquent regions of the brain. There are certain regions of the brain that have very well-defined functions that are completely intolerant of injury. The motor strip in the posterior frontal lobe, the speech areas, Broca's area and Wernicke's area on the left side, the brainstem. Parts of the thalamus. These are areas that if you damage them, even tiny injuries cause major deficits. But many of the other parts of the brain, much of the frontal lobes, parts of the parietal lobes, you can take out and put in a wastebasket, and it has nothing to do with the patient's neurological functioning.
Okay, so I guess what he's saying is that there's a lot of parts of the brain where it's going to affect consciousness, but then he's saying there's other parts of the brain that it's not affecting the consciousness, and this is probably where the soul thing comes in. Do you think that's what he's talking about?
Yeah, definitely. He's saying that, she wasn't consciously affected in any way, even though she was, he was removing a tumor from her brain.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of interesting, though. That kind of is confusing a little bit.
I mean, it's interesting, but it could just be something as simple as that it just didn't affect the brain. I don't know.
Yeah. True that, man.
Like only certain things I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. What did he come up with? Did he come up with a solution for that?
I guess he said Christianity.
Yeah, because I was thinking, man, this man sounds like he's a Christian. Is he a Christian?
Big time. He's gonna get into
Yeah, then
that.
I can't believe him. Then he's probably lying.
How dismissive of you.
I mean, come on, because it's like I intuitively felt it. I was like, man, this man sounds like a Christian.
Yeah.
And then you confirmed it. So,
they're
like,
gonna
man,
get into it. Oh yeah. He's probably the new Christian apologist here.
Yeah, that
What
he's
I
a liar. He's lying.
Yeah.
believe in is that my personal consciousness, everything that makes up me, my memories, my traits, will cease to exist. That's what all the evidence shows. Will be destroyed once the physical substrate that is me destroyed. Whether it returns to an ultimate reality that is phenomenal, as an idealism, I'm increasingly more sympathetic to.
Yeah.
But all the evidence we have that conscious awareness in us when our brain is gone is also gone.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. He's talking about the ego, that self, like even in Buddhism, it's like the self, the soul doesn't exist. That once that's gone, it's gone. It's temporary. It never existed to begin
Right.
with. But the phenomenal consciousness is the thing that reality rides on. I guess that's the view of consciousness. And so Paul asks, always suspicious of the phrase all the evidence. Yeah. How can you say all the evidence when you don't know if you have all the evidence yet? So yeah, I guess he's just talking about all the evidence he knows of. Maybe that's what he should caveat that with.
Right. What he believes is all the evidence.
Yeah, for now. Yeah. Tentative.
So that's pretty clear. Michael, when I wrote my book Heavens on Earth about the scientific search for the afterlife, I dealt with the mind uploaders, the cryonicists, and all those transhumanists. But I had questions for them that I thought could apply to theists who make this argument. That is, I'll just give you a few of these. How does God go about the duplication or transformation process to ensure conscious continuity and personal perspective? Is it your atoms and patterns that are resurrected, or just the patterns? If both, and you are physically resurrected, does God reconstitute your body? so it's no longer subject to disease and aging? If it's just the patterns of you that are resurrected, what is the platform that holds the information? Is there something in heaven that is the equivalent of a computer hard drive or the cloud? Is there some sort of heavenly quantum field that retains your thoughts and memories? If you're not religious, or even if you are and hold out hope that one day scientists will be able to clone your body and duplicate your brain, or upload your mind into a computer or the cloud, or create a virtual reality in which you come alive again, we face the same technological problems as God would of how all this is done. What is your thought about that?
Well, St. Thomas Aquinas believed that we can know a great deal about ourselves and our ultimate fate, etc., by reason, but that there were things we could only know by faith.
So here comes the Christianity part. So how can we know anything by faith? That's my question. I guess faith is defined as hope. So we know things by the hope we have. I've never really understood that.
Yeah, but there's no knowing in having faith. I mean,
That's why you have faith, because you don't know.
yeah,
That's what I
right.
thought. That's how I always understood it when I was a Christian.
Right.
And I think one has to distinguish that. There's much that I cannot prove or I cannot present evidence for about my beliefs about the afterlife and heaven and God that I do believe, but I believe as a matter of reading the Bible and being a Catholic and studying that. But those are not strictly scientific questions. But there's much that I do believe that has a scientific basis, and from what I see, the science dovetails rather nicely with the religious perspective of Christianity. But I don't claim scientific proof for any of that. And but I think that the soul is immortal based on scientific reasons that have nothing to do with faith.
Well, I mean, there's nothing that's immortal. The universe has a finite lifetime, and there's no scientific evidence for anything being immortal. But Mike, let's get down a little bit to fact. There's this beautiful case study by one of your colleagues, Itzhak Fried, that I've worked with for many years, that was published a couple of years ago about a 14-year-old girl, no previous medical illnesses, who complained when she got 13 or so of intense episodes of feeling guilt and some distress, typically in a social situation at school or with friends or with her parents. At some point, she got a tonic-clonic epileptic seizures and was evaluated by neurologists, and they detected a tumor in the anterior cingulate subgenual, so in the frontal part, but underneath the corpus callosum.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did this study where first Itzhak Fried now did put electrodes in there to monitor and could show that every time you stimulate in the brain of this girl, you invoked intense feelings of guilt. Now, guilt, so I grew up as a Roman Catholic and was devout. And of course, there's a lot of guilt in Roman. I mean, it's sort of a Catholic emotion. So here you could invoke guilt. Furthermore, then they did the resection. They removed the tumor, and the girl never had. In a second operation, the girl never had these episodes of guilt again. I don't know whether she had any feelings of guilt about anything, but what I do know that these intense episodes of guilt. So here you have a really nice causal study where social emotion that is often associated with religious practice, feeling guilty about a sin you committed or something that you did or didn't do inappropriate, that seems to have a very concrete correlate in a particular brain area of the brain. You stimulate, you get guilt, you remove the area, the guilt is gone. So why do you need anything else? Well, in addition, there's a soul that feels guilt, but yeah, you can postulate that, but that seems completely redundant. Here, it's all explained by a particular part of the brain that's active.
Yeah, it's
Michael?
kind of like they removed for Catholicism. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this in
Right.
Israel, so
The-
presumably she was Jewish.
All right, all right. The Aristotelian way, and I think this is strongly supported by the neuroscience, of understanding the issues of necessity and sufficiency for various aspects of the mind, is that there are 5 aspects of the soul, which is almost interchangeable with the idea of mind. 5 aspects of the soul that are clearly material and are intimately associated with the body, and the body is necessary and sufficient for the exercise of these 5 things. The first thing is homeostasis, physiological, maintenance of the heart rate, the breathing, all that stuff. Clearly, that's controlled by the brain. The second is locomotion. The brain lets me move my limbs. The third is sensation. The brain is obviously involved in my vision, my hearing, my tactile sense. The fourth is emotion. The brain is obviously involved in emotional states like feelings of guilt and so on. That clearly is related to the brain. You can change your emotional states very easily by having a glass of wine. So that obviously changes. And the fifth is memory. The brain is clearly involved in memory. The hippocampi, the mammillary bodies, you can lose the ability to form short-term memories by bilateral hippocampal lesions. So those are material activities of the brain. So this young girl was obviously having either subclinical seizures or some kind of problem in a region of her cingulate gyri that were causing her to have this emotion of guilt. But Aristotle would say, hey, that's perfectly fine. Emotion comes from the brain. No one doubts that.
Including the conscious experience, of course,
yeah,
right?
Yes, of
because
course.
Here I'm talking about the conscious experience.
Absolutely. The Aristotelian view of the intellect and will is different. And the Thomistic view follows that the intellect, and that's the capacity to form concepts that are abstract, the capacity to make propositions, the capacity to do reason, the capacity to make arguments, is an immaterial power of the human soul. It depends on the brain. That is, the brain is necessary ordinarily for the ordinary exercise of our intellect, the kind of thing we're doing right now. If I get hit on the head, I'm not going to be as effective on this podcast as if I wasn't hit on the head. But the brain is not sufficient for that. That is, that there's an immaterial aspect of our soul that is responsible for our intellect, and the same for will. Will is the appetite that follows on reason, and that's an immaterial aspect of our soul as well. And there's actually a ton of neuroscience that I think supports that viewpoint. There's also a ton of logic that supports that viewpoint. I'm happy to go into if you want.
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Christof.
Okay, so we know in your surgical experiments, right, you can evoke the feeling of not just the movement of limbs if you stimulate, motor or premotor area, but you can also evoke the feeling of will, where people say, I wanted to move my mouth, but I didn't actually move it. I had an intent. Either a patient will talk about intention or they will talk about will. Now, so you can always, so we know that stimulating particular parts of the brain seems to involve centers that typically are involved. Also, if you scan people and you do, you do appropriate experiment that seem to relate to the execution of what we would call voluntary activity, right? I raise my hand now or now, like in the Libet experiment. Now, of course, you can always say, yeah, this is all necessary, but it's not sufficient. There is this additional quantity X. I'm not sure how I would ever show that's not the case. It reminds me a little bit of the radio receiver theory of William James that he voiced at some point. Right. I don't know how seriously he was. It was right. Yeah, I mean, clearly the brain is necessary, but there's sort of this. It's as necessary as if you're listening to symphony orchestra, the radio is necessary, but the radio itself doesn't generate the music; it's generated somewhere else. Again, that's not very satisfactory compared to the standard neuroscience explanation, which is I know this piece of brain is necessary and sufficient to generate consciousness, conscious experience, or the feeling of will, or wanting, or intending.
But Michael, it's your contention that there are certain areas under brain stimulation that cause basic sensory or motor experience.
So Again, it's just parts of the brain. Some parts of the brain are sufficient to do some things, and other parts of our behavior and feelings and things of that nature, like I guess abstractions, conceptualizing, intellectualism, doing math, stuff like that relies on a soul, like the will to live, the will to do things. That's all handled by the soul. I guess that's the thinking on that part. Um, so not sure. And what Christof Koch is saying is that you can tweak the brain and you can take the will away, or you can but again, I'm not sure if this really defeats his point, because he can look at the brain. It's necessary in order for these things to happen. I guess it's kind of like you can have a seizure that makes you laugh. You can have a seizure that makes you do certain things, react certain ways, but there's no seizure that makes you do math, or no seizures that make you do abstraction or intelligence or things of that nature, right? So I guess that's kind of the difference that he's drawing. Not sure what you guys think about that. Anyways, let's keep going.
Experiences, but not higher abstract reasoning. So,
Correct.
or free will choices. Where do you imagine these things are happening?
Well, first of all, if I may, I just want to point out, as Christof raised the neuroscientific evidence, there's quite a bit of neuroscientific evidence that supports the view that the intellect and will are immaterial powers of the soul. Wilder Penfield did a lot of great work on this. He operated on 1,100 patients over his career with awake brain surgery. The patients were awake, they had local anesthesia, they didn't feel pain, and he mapped their cortex. And he found that he could elicit 4 and only 4 different kinds of responses from stimulating the cortex. He could elicit movement. He could elicit sensations of various sorts. He could elicit memories occasionally, particularly in the temporal lobe, and he could elicit emotions occasionally. He could not elicit what he called mind action, and what he meant by mind action was abstract thought, a sense of self, contemplation. And he then looked at seizures, and he looked at the
Yes.
phenomenology of seizures. What happens when people have seizures? And I've seen the same thing, that when people have seizures, if they remain conscious during the seizures, they have one of 4 things. They'll have movement. They can have a focal seizure where they move a limb. They'll have sensations, a tingling or a flash of light. You can have memories evoked by seizures, and you can have emotions evoked by seizures. There are kinds of seizures that make you laugh, gelastic seizures. There are seizures that make you very frightened. But there are no calculus seizures. There are no mathematics seizures. There are no logic seizures. There are no seizures that make a person engage in abstract thought. The closest seizure that comes to that is a kind of a seizure called a forced thinking seizure. And it's a seizure that was studied in some detail by Penfield. They're very rare. And forced thinking seizures, I think of as more like OCD seizures. They're people who are compulsively think about a particular thing, like did I lock the door? Did I turn the oven off? Stuff like that. But it's more OCD kind of things rather than abstract thought per se. So there is considerable scientific evidence that intellect and will cannot be evoked from the brain in terms of abstract thought by stimulating the brain.
Mike, evidence of absence. Evidence of absence isn't evidence of absence, right? A prime precept of science. And Penfield did his.
He said that wrong. He said evidence of absence isn't evidence of absence. That's a tautology. I think what he meant to say was evidence of absence doesn't equal absence of evidence. We can forgive him on that, guys.
400 years ago. Yes, he was a genius, and he started, or he really pushed the field of electric stimulation, but he also didn't find pain responses that we now know are prevalent in the insula. And of course, you can put people in a magnetic scanner and ask them to do math problems, like people have done, and you see a particular region in the prefrontal cortex will light up. And incidentally, if you, 1/3 of the brain is what you and your colleagues call non-eloquent cortex. But it's simply not true that if you remove them, patients don't have loss. If you remove them and you test them in specific contexts where they have to do social reasoning or moral reasoning or higher order thinking, they all show deficits because.
All right, so they're just going to disagree on all that stuff, and really, we'd have to go back and research to really know who's telling the truth here. But it makes sense. I mean, it seems like, why is the soul only relative to certain things and not other things? Not sure what the point is on that. But anyways, he's going to get into AI and its implications, all of these implications with AI and stuff like that. So, in machine learning and how that relates. Let's see if I think it's here.
Bizarre state.
Not yet, but soon.
Here we go.
Yeah, I see a priori how mechanistic matter, as he understood, right before the advent of electromagnetism and quantum mechanics, could produce thought. Now today we know how thinking and how intelligence arises because we can build it into artificial network. So
sure. So how does a neural network produce a concept? What are the details on that?
Oh, it's abstract. It's a progressive layer, so you wouldn't get it in 2 or 3 layers. But if you have deep enough network, look, if we interact every day over the next month or 2, my brain will wire up neurons that represent you. And if I think about you and your ideas and hylomorphism and Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, all of that, I will wire up neurons that represent that because it's an elegant way for the brain using minimal neuronal resources to represent things that my brain obviously deems important enough. I mean, we know because we can simulate such things in artificial neural networks. There's no magic about it.
You can simulate the causation of concepts in artificial neural networks. I don't get that. How do artificial neural networks contemplate mercy? I mean, it's a bizarre state.
Not yet, but soon.
Yeah, I see. A priori, you're right. I haven't dealt with mercy because I'm a visual neuroscientist. I'm primarily interested in and so I haven't dealt with it. But I see no reason for it to.
Let me ask a counterfactual question for you, Michael, on specific examples. The 2 most famous from neuroscience, Phineas Gage and Henry Moyleson. Why didn't their brains or minds come back in after the damage?
Well, first of all, I don't know Moyleson. I know Gage.
Moyleson was the one who was the
HM.
Who's what was it? The hippocampus was taken out because of his seizures, and then he could never again form form memory.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I'll ask a more general question, which I asked Deepak Chopra. Where does Aunt Millie's mind go when her brain dies of Alzheimer's? And Deepak's answer, it returns to where it was before, because he believes consciousness is the the ground of all being, and so on.
First of all, Phineas Gage obviously got a spike driven through his frontal lobes, and it changed his emotional state, his baseline emotions. He had been a very religious, kind of conservative guy beforehand, and was a little more of a libertine after this injury, which is totally consistent with a hylomorphic view of how the brain works. Meaning you can change emotions, you can change emotional states. If you're continuously drinking whiskey, you're going to emotionally be a different person, or if you get a spike driven through your brain, you're going to be emotionally different. Getting the spike driven through his brain didn't make him into a mathematician. That is, that there's a difference between emotional states and abstract thought. On the loss of memory from bilateral hippocampal injury, I mean that's a very, very real thing, and but that's memory, and that is a physical aspect of what the brain does. No one denies that. Memory is not abstract. So you'll lose the ability to form new memories. Yes, that's certainly true. But it's abstract thought. And I'm still not clear on how a neural network, integrated neural network, whatever, how does the Venn diagram of an integrated neural network overlap with psychological predicates like concepts? How does that work?
Well, if you feed it, let's say human novels as is standard now in GPT, right? You feed it human I am sure I haven't tested it, but because now it has access to all of the human literature, and human literature is full of things like emotion and religion and mercy and other concepts. And ultimately, in these networks, there will emerge nodes or clusters of nodes that will represent the idea of mercy. And I'm sure we can right now.
Right.
I can ask ChatGPT what does it think about mercy, and it'll give me some reasonable sounding answer.
Right. But does the Chat GPT have the subjective experience of thinking about mercy?
Oh boy.
No, so that's a separate, Mike. So we can have an entirely separate debate, and I think this is the debate I'm personally much more likely where something like hylomorphism may be relevant. What we don't understand, even in the concept of a single visual stimulus, an isolated bright light. You know, cars can navigate. A Tesla can navigate, but I can see. Tesla car doesn't see in the way we see.
Right.
It doesn't have the subjective feeling. But that applies to anything. That applies to seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, wanting, desiring, and also abstract thoughts. That is a true mystery, which right now we don't have any, at least generally accepted answer to how conscious experience comes about in a physical world.
I think the only thing that we can say with confidence, and we can say a lot of things with confidence about this, is that there's a correspondence between certain activities in the brain and certain psychological states. There's no question about that. However, from an ontological standpoint, it is not clear how the material activity in the brain corresponds to, or it generates or is related to the psychological aspects.
The experiential aspects. That's the beating heart of the mind-body problem.
Right. And I think it is largely a problem that we've created ourselves with what I think is faulty metaphysics. Prior to Descartes, the hylomorphic way of understanding the world was widespread in the Western world. Descartes really changed things on that. And of course, his view of the human being was that the human being was this composite of two substances, of race.
Yeah, so the mind-body problem. So there is a lacking in a metaphysical view. Like that's what we talk about all the time. Like there's the physicalist view that would say that somehow the mind is generated by the body. You know, it's not just correlated, but it's generated. But it creates in this dualistic framework, there's this interaction problem, you know. How do we explain the interaction problem? Even if you were to pose a soul, well, how does the soul do that? So I think I got booted off of this thing. You guys able to hear my voice? You guys able to hear me talking though? I think I might have let that video run too long. I don't know. Okay, cool. You can hear me. Okay. So yeah, like I was saying, you know, there's a dichotomy there. There's either consciousness or the physical that causes experience, or that experience is founded on, like the fundamental nature. That's where the dichotomy lays at, you know. And then you can always say, well, maybe there's a different thing, you know, like a different unknown property. But we don't, you know, then we'd just be guessing. We don't know what that even means. So for me, it's either consciousness or physicalism. Panpsychism says both, but again, that's dualism, and it has a lot of problems to explain. Whereas it seems like physicalism or idealism would be the preference, just on a more parsimonious type of thing, right? Approach. But you know, physicalism leads to the hard problem of consciousness, and idealism has a few less problems, I would say. I can hear you in the video, Paul, just tripping. Okay, cool, man. So I'm gonna go back to the video. Let's see if there's another part of this we can look at. Yeah, let's go to a little deeper into the video. Here we go.
So they pulled the ventilator while all 4 patients were in Michigan were on EEG monitoring, and then what you can see in 4, it just went down. In 2 of the 4, the EEG went down. In 2 of them, they had these paradoxical episodes of high frequency activity for 2 or 3 minutes.
Right.
Where technically the heart had already stopped, but then they had the EEG power decreased, but then they had the spontaneous episodes, but within 7 minutes or everything went flatline. And that everything we know is once your brain is truly flatlined throughout the brain, including deep structure, yes, there is no more conscious experience.
How would that kind of brain activity account for the ability to read people's name tags and to know who's in the room and to
I would like to see that tested. I grant you that. If that's the case, I would like to see that tested, not retroactively.
No. Pam Reynolds was, in a very real sense, a prospective study, meaning they didn't expect her to have brain death, to have a near-death experience. But it was prospective in the sense that she was as rigorously monitored as a human being can be monitored.
Yeah, the Pam Reynolds case. This is regarding the near-death experience. And from what I remember, Pam Reynolds was put into a coma, and then she had her ears, stuffed up with little clicks, so she couldn't hear anything. Obviously, she couldn't see anything. They dropped her body temperature real low, so she was dead on all counts. Drained the blood from her brain, all of that stuff. Yet she claimed she had veridical experience, meaning she was able to hear what the doctors were talking about, hear what was going on in different rooms. It was all verified, all of these sort of things that they had no real answer for. And yeah, that creates for me a lot of questions, because how could that really happen? And even though it is considered anomalous, there are millions and billions of experiences like that over history being told. Cafe says, undergo an actual death. What matters is not the physiological finality of death, but the subjective phenomenology of the experienced ego death phenomenon. Yeah, I kind of lean that way too, because I went through ego death when I tried hallucinogens and things like that. And, I felt like I was undergoing a psychological death, which was sort of terrifying. It's not about whether the body flatlined, it's about whether the veil dropped. Exactly. Because you hear about all of these near-death experiences of people who weren't dying. Maybe they're just going through a traumatic situation, yet they had the commonalities of these near-death experiences, Same with people who try hallucinogens, deep meditation, things like that. So, yeah, it may be something else besides just the physical death that's causing this. Kappa says, but because they cross the internal boundary between illusion and reality. Right. That seems to be where I'm going with it, based on everything that I've ever known or heard from people who had these sort of experiences. That seems to be the case. Absolutely.
They drained the blood out of her brain in order to fix the aneurysm, and there was 30 minutes of no blood flow whatsoever to her brain, with electrical silence in her brainstem and cortex, and she watched the operation from the ceiling of the room and told them details. Told them details. I mean, I know Bob Spetzler. I know the surgeon who did it, and he said, "Hey,
I don't doubt that this is what she said. However, there's simply no way in an uncontrolled study to rule out post-experimental cueing. She woke up an hour later, 2 hours later. Maybe she imagined this. Maybe,
That's kind of a weak response. She imagined this, but he just said that it was verified by witnesses and things like that. I think it's always good to be honest and come with an honest argument, or just say, very interesting, I'll have to look into that. But just to dismiss it as imagination, I don't think I agree with the idealist on that one, though. I think the near-death experience is interesting, even if you want to call it anomalous. All it takes is one example. All it takes is one example to call into question your metaphysic. You know what I mean? That's just my idea. And also, you know, there's explanations on idealism that can account for the near death experience. You don't have to just dismiss it. That kind of just reveals that he sort of has a belief that he's more involved in, you know. He's more married to a belief that there is no soul, there is no these near death experiences aren't quote unquote real. But I don't think he's really making a good argument against that, you know, or for his position.
You know, again, this is why we need to do science, which we need to do, you know, in an unbiased way to try to test
No,
this.
but
A million people die each year
but
in the US, right? You know?
yes,
So we should be able to collect data, and people are trying, like the Sam Pernier
Sam
study.
Parney
They're
is doing
trying.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we should have a little bit more evidence that, yeah, there's this one patient and this one patient. This is not what Carl Sagan calls extraordinary evidence.
Well,
It's
I think, I mean, Sagan, I think, is exactly right that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The thing is that the extraordinary claim here is that all of these people, what amounts to millions of people, are wrong. That's the extraordinary claim.
But I don't know if Koch is really saying that. I don't know if he's saying that they're wrong necessarily. I think he wouldn't deny their experience. Cafe says the NDE is also an area that many neuroscientists speculate is another opportunity for mystical experience. I think that's why some people describe psychedelic experience as a kind of forced NDE. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm getting at too. Really interesting.
And the extraordinary claim in naturalist or materialist neuroscience is that mental predicates can arise from brain predicates. That is, that the extraordinary claim is that concepts and a subjective experience arise from simple matter.
I see it every day in a
That's-
scanner. If you put a person in the scanner and you ask them to think abstract thoughts,
no,
you'll see activity in particular parts of their brain.
What you're seeing is correlation. We're talking about causation. That's a different thing. No one questions correlation. No one questions that. There's no question.
Yeah, he's right about that. That's a correlation, not a causation question. And I think Christof Koch understands that. And I'm not really sure why he's resistant to what he's saying right there. Not sure.
Question that that correlation goes on. Causation is a completely different thing, and no one has the faintest clue as to how that could even happen, let alone
Of course, we have clues. I mean, there are lots of, you might not believe the books, but there are lots of theories written about how intelligent, read Global Neuronal Workspace, how intelligence arises in the brain.
And the number.
Well, now he's talking about intelligence, and I think they were talking about consciousness. I think intelligence and consciousness are two different things. I mean, on idealism, intelligence can happen with unconscious beings and even computers and things like that. They do intelligent things. If you define intelligence as, you know, problem solving, we have AI that does that every day, right? But I think the experiential part, you know, what it's like, you know, to be solving problems, or what it's like to be experiencing anything, that's what's in question, really.
Of theories is the evidence that no one understands it, because if you understand it, you've got one theory. The point is, people are groping. People are groping for theories because they don't have
the study of intelligence and
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson had a good point with that. He says, notice there's only like very few books on, you know, evolution and things we already know, except textbooks, you know. But there's no real books of trying to explain evolution or trying to explain, you know, electromagnetism, things like that. But there's tons of books on consciousness. And Neil deGrasse Tyson says this just lets you know that's evidence in itself that consciousness is one of those areas that there are no consensus on. It's a mystery. When you see lots of books about a particular topic, that's kind of evidence that they don't know what they're talking about.
natural intelligence and artificial intelligence is it's in infancy. It's really only in, 100 years old. Yeah, and if you compare us against a mature science like science, where there is one theory, yes, we're not at that stage yet.
So do you believe that in split brain surgery that there are two conscious human beings inside the brain?
In a complete split brain commissurotomy, there will be two conscious beings, one that can talk, the other one.
That's a pretty extraordinary claim. And why don't people feel that?
And a Nobel Prize was given out for it, indeed.
Why don't people feel, I mean, these people feel completely normal.
Because
normal.
you talk to, when you say people, you talk to the left hemisphere. If you silent the left hemisphere using sodium amytal, then what remains is someone who isn't very eloquent anymore. They can still say yes, no. They can still sing. They can still, of course, explain the wide variety of the entire gamut of human emotion, but they can't talk with fluency anymore.
So you think that's a different person?
It's a different person, and partly they have different memories. Yes.
Yeah, so this gets into something I think I was talking to Joel Davis about this, is that you can have different streams of consciousness, even within one being, that there really is this disassociation that happens for people. And on idealism, we're all sort of disassociated in the same way. Cafe says, I thought that was an interesting comment. He spoke of it as though it was eternally unknowable to itself. Yeah. But yeah, there's all sorts of streams of consciousness, and they're all just disassociated. And anyways, I'm getting off track.
It's in patients who have cerebral palsy. It's very common. In fact, one of the biggest problems they have is when they try to move, for example, if they try to move their arm, their leg will move also. That is, that there's a lack of integration of neurological function in these patients. Do you believe these represent separate centers of consciousness in these patients?
I simply don't know enough about them. In the corpus callosum, it's very clear. Right? They have 200 million fibers cut, so now they have two essentially relatively not totally, but relatively independent cortical hemispheres. I don't know about Paul. I simply don't know.
So if these people were to, say, for example, sign their name, would the right hemisphere sign a different name than the left? I mean, I don't even understand the notion of two separate consciousnesses in one human being. That doesn't even make sense.
Why is this so difficult to understand? There are two conscious entities in one skull. I don't see. In fact, there's a novel written by a philosopher about it out of Toronto. It's very funny based on this idea. It involves a jury trial, and the right hemisphere committed the crime, but the left hemisphere, but the right one is innocent.
It's a novel because it's fiction.
That's
it's not fiction. It's what the let's just
right.
Yeah, a lot of this depends on what you mean by two separate consciousnesses. I mean, I feel I am multiple selves. There's the future Shermer. I'm going to be different tomorrow than I am today, and I operate on that. I set up conditions now.
Mike, this is different.
I know. I understand.
The claim here is that this other mind, if I'm split brain, that you're really Christof is the left hemisphere, and the right hemisphere may as well be on the dark side of the moon. With respect to Maya, I would not be able to access the emotions and the experiential state of the right hemisphere. That's a claim.
Okay. So Dan Dennett had a nice phrase called burden tennis. Who has the burden of proof, right? The burden of proof is on you. Whack. No, the burden of proof is on you. Whack. No. Okay. So, the extraordinary claims and all that stuff. Okay. So it depends on, where your starting point is, I guess. Right. In terms of materialism, where the brain is everything, that's the unusual belief in the world. Most people are dualists; they're natural born dualists, and that's what people have thought throughout history. But okay, let's turn to the next subject: free will. So the three positions are determined.
Yeah, this is going to be good. I'd like to hear this. How many people believe in free will out there? Do you believe in free will, and why? And by the way, you can join the show, if you want to jump on and conversate live, we can do that. I got the link right there. But yeah, free will is one of those things that's very interesting. I think it comes down to how you define free will and all of these different things. Libertarian free will, I'm not sure how that works logically. It's kind of like a square circle type of thing for me. But let's see how these folks answer that question. I'm sure they're going to differ.
Determinism, compatibilism, and well, I guess libertarian free will, as it's called. Michael, I gather you would call yourself a libertarian free will defender, right? That there's, yeah.
My view of free will, right? I'm a libertarian. I think that free will is what Aristotle would call a rational appetite, meaning as opposed to sensitive appetite. Sensitive appetite is from the brain, from the body. You're hungry, you're tired, you do this or that, you have lust, whatever. Rational appetite is where you have a desire that's based on reason. For example, you read the 10 Commandments, makes sense to you, say, I'm going to follow these things. That's what free will is.
Okay.
And I think free will is real. First of all, I think it's self-refuting to deny free will, because if you deny free will, what you're saying is that the very act of saying you deny free will is driven by something that's
would
that's
say
not
you were
your will.
determined to say that you deny it.
Right. So what? But why would you then trust that opinion if you didn't?
What do you think, Caleb? How are you doing, by the way, sir?
I'm doing all right. Just drinking my coffee and enjoying the talk.
The stream, cool. Yeah. So you are a determinist. So yeah, I'm kind of a determinist too. That this kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, but anyways, let's keep going.
You choose it freely.
Okay, Christof.
I free will. I believe in free will. I believe in the libertarian free will, but it's based on the ontology of an intrinsic powers ontology, where the real causal actors are the intrinsic powers inherent in a physical substrate like my brain. And if I lose my brain, then there's no more free will. In fact, there's no more mind. But I do believe in, contrary to most scientists, I do believe in free will, in the classical libertarian free will.
But that you're not suggesting there's a little homunculus up there making the decisions for you, right?
No, it's it's exactly as Mike said. When I am faced with a moral dilemma, do I do A or do I do B? Then if I deliberate, if I have a clear fork, if I'm conscious aware of A and non-A, let's just keep it simple, A versus non-A. I think I go through the reasoning, why should I do A, why should I do non-A, what are the consequences, and I decide to do non-A, let's say, and then this is a freely taken decision. Yes, there's a correlate with the underlying brain, but the actual decision happens in consciousness, which is different, which is certainly different from its substrate, right? I'm in that sense, I'm not a classical materialist.
So the Benjamin.
Well, that's kind of weird, Caleb, that a neuroscientist would say he believes in libertarian free will. Kind of just threw me off right there. I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, it's when I hear Christians who study biology and they're just like, "Oh yeah, but evolution isn't true," and it's just like, what?
Right. Like, because libertarian free will means that you couldn't have done otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Means you're not like you're not within a context of things that influence you to do anything. It's like, from what I understand, libertarian free will is like, oh, you can just make choices without any influence at all. Like they just come about, and I'm not really sure how that can even happen without, because even on souls and things like that, it seems like that would be impossible logically.
Yeah, I mean, both libertarian free will and pure determinism are the minority. It's like most people are compatibilists, and I know you mentioned that compatibilism is sort of a subset of determinism, but like I still feel like there's like they still try to say though that there is free will, and that's just the one thing I would disagree with on that. But
right, because you got to think you're responding, like whenever you make a decision, it's in response to something else, even if it's a want.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Anyways, let's hear how he breaks it down.
Yes.
LeBay experiments, you would explain, is just a different part of the brain is making the decision before you're consciously aware of it?
Oh, it's a correlate. It's
Okay.
clearly now the limit experiment, of course, is highly construed, right? You're being trained, you're sitting there, and you're supposed to watch a clock, and then lift the hand. It's pretty meaningless. In other words, there's no moral judgment implied or any consequences, behavioral consequence, whether I lift it now or lift it 1 second later. My hand. It's not like I'm being asked actually to choose something in a restaurant or to make a choice between mate A or mate B or job A or job B, right? So those sort of experiments haven't been done yet because they are, of course, much more difficult to do in an experimental context. But yeah, there will clearly be correlates in the brain, but those are not the true causes. But that's according to this intrinsic power ontology.
Michael, does that surprise you to hear that?
Well, no, I mean, Leibniz also found, and again, I think there are tremendous limitations to his experimental method. I mean, as I said, it's pushing a button doesn't have too much to do with the exercise of free will in real life. But he found that the decision to veto pushing the button was electrically silent, which he described as free won't.
Yeah.
But I don't. I mean, his experiments are fascinating, and he was a fascinating man. I think he was a
No, but I mean, does
scientist.
Christof being a libertarian free will defender surprise you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it surprises me just because most neuroscientists don't defend free will.
Right.
But I think Christof is a very deep thinker and has a very open mind. And I actually believe personally that no one actually denies free will, or no one actually.
Yes.
The reason
I
is
had this debate with
because-
Dan Dennett, and I agree.
Yeah.
I said, no.
Right.
I says, Dan, are you free to choose your wine?
Right.
When I had dinner, and he did choose. I said,
Right.
see, wasn't that free? He said, oh no, that's all predetermined.
Because I think that what you believe is not merely what you say, it's what you do. If you ask an embezzler, do you believe in being financially honest? If he says yes, you know he's lying because that's not what he does. So if you take a person who denies free will and you go and you pour your coffee on his laptop.
Effective.
How do you reconcile that argument right there, Caleb? Be interested.
So like with this, well, I mean, what it seems to be that they're saying is just making choices is free will, and I guess like if you go along with that definition, sure, that's free will. But it's like, to me, it's like us having the freedom of choice, at least in most circumstances, isn't the same thing as having a free will. And I feel like that line is being blurred here. I don't know if you agree with that.
I mean, yeah, I kind of feel what you're saying. Like, just because we make choices, that isn't evidence that was freely made.
Yeah.
Like, free of what? What are we free of? Because it seems like even just by existing, you have to make a choice. Like, you have to make a choice. Even if your choice is to make no choices, that in itself is a choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're all born into these circumstances that are out of our control, and so it's like we have these limited set of choices that we can make, but it's like, are they really free? Like, no.
Now, Al Harding says, message me when the video is over. I had all I can takes. I can't takes no more.
No more.
Yeah. It seems like with Al, free will is always a stickler for him. Because I think he leans sort of conservative, if I'm not mistaken. And you know how a lot of conservatives are very big on accountability and responsibility in society. And so they feel like this hinges on free will being true. But punishment and rewards can themselves be deterministic factors.
Right? Oh, yeah. I mean, to me, it's like all right, so you realize there's no free will. To me, that's very eye-opening in the sense that, okay, so, someone who does bad stuff, maybe they're not as responsible for that action as we thought they once were. So then that's not saying, oh, we need to just not do anything to anyone who does anything bad, but it's like maybe we need to just rethink how we deal with those those situations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do we punish? Do we go like, oh, we're gonna make your life hell? We're gonna torture you. We're gonna make you just feel like the worst thing possible, or are we gonna go, huh? There, something went wrong, and we can do something that will make your life better, and make it less likely that you'll do that bad thing again. And it's like I'm going towards that latter thing.
Right. It seems to be an effective strategy, like because if that wasn't the case, then why isn't everybody making the same choices?
Yeah.
Everybody has to want the same thing if free will is really true. If libertarian free will is true, then it seems like everybody else would want the same thing because wants are not determined. They're just, they're just what everybody want, whatever that means, which it makes no sense to me. I can't even explain how that would work or how they explain it themselves. But
It's
anyway,
like you can't control what you want. It's just like
right.
yeah.
Crazy.
You for ruining his laptop. And you can say, hey, I didn't have free will. I couldn't have chosen. You might as well blame the coffee cup. But he won't buy that. He won't accept that. So everybody believes in free will in their everyday life.
That's a compatibilist view, right? People
Yeah,
believe it for
yeah.
practical reasons and for moral reasons to be able
Right.
to punish people and reward people.
Right.
Well, there's that.
But what about the evidence, Mike, that we do have evidence, despite my belief in it, that you can stimulate particular parts of the brain, in this case, the parietal operculum, and get the feeling that people, it's quite striking if you read the dialogue with his patients. Oh, suddenly I felt a will. I felt an urge to move.
Well,
And sometimes you actually do get movement if you stimulate at higher current amplitude.
Yeah, you don't. Well, first of all, the actual stimulation of the will would be that you wouldn't realize it was connected to the stimulation. That is, that you would think it was your own will. And Penfield did that a lot, and he could never simulate will on his experiments. But you can alter the will just by having a few drinks. I mean, you don't need to stimulate the brain.
Yeah, but here we're talking about, more recent neurosurgeons doing I'm thinking about the French group, Des Moguet. They've published several papers on it, one in Science, where they stimulate particular parts. And then Isaac Fried, again, another colleague of yours, stimulating the anterior cingulate, where they get a very discrete feeling, either of intentionality or where the patient themselves says, I suddenly have the will to move.
Okay, I'm not familiar with it. I have to take a peek at it. You would have to sort out emotional states, which can certainly be stimulated in the brain, from will as kind of as an isolated thing.
This is relatively, if you read the account, it's not confounded with emotion. Yeah, I grant you can get emotion. This is just for example, they have a desire to roll my tongue. They have a desire to move the mouth. One case of Isaac Fried, they have this girl, and she, every time he stimulates somewhere in prefrontal cortex, she has this desire. She finds the situation incredibly funny. Talking about abstract. She doesn't know why. He said, why are you guys all so funny? And then he stimulates again and again. The patient reports this feeling of mirth or hilarity.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can get that with the gelastic seizures. Seizures in the hypothalamus can make you think things are funny. But that's not will that follows on reason. The only kind of free will I believe in is the abstract judgment that something is morally right or wrong based on.
All right. Enough. Right.
It's like there's a lot we could talk about, but it's like I feel like getting into the whole free will discussion will distract from
that's
mysticism.
That's a huge thing, man. So yeah, you were wanting to talk about mysticism. I think you were saying religious experiences versus that.
Yeah, and I mean, on the free will thing, I will just say this: like, 2 books that I would recommend for anyone to read is by Robert Salapsky. I think you've heard of him. Have you, Scott?
Yes.
And he's 2 eye-opening books on that is his book Behave: The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst, and his book Determined: The Science of Life Without Free Will. So I would just recommend those 2.
Yeah. I've listened to a lot of his talks and debates and things like that. He's got some really good points. Daniel Dennett does too, but I think Daniel Dennett is a compatibilist as well.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He's also the one who thinks consciousness is an illusion. So
Is an illusion. Yeah. What do you think about that? How could an illusion defeat consciousness as a quote unquote real phenomenon? I don't understand. Like,
well,
I
even
can try to understand maybe what he's saying is it's not the consciousness that's the illusion, it's the mind that's an illusion.
well, I mean, even when I was in the materialist camp, it's like this line of thought of, well, if we're going to try to explain consciousness, the only way to explain it away is as an illusion. That didn't sit right with me. It's just like, no, like you have to explain consciousness, in a materialistic way, or you just realize, or just admit your metaphysics don't add up.
That's kind of what I came to with materialism because just in principle, I mean, you got to understand materialists themselves are the ones that came up with the mind body problem or the hard
Yeah.
problem of consciousness. That's their thing.
I mean, and I understand that, idealists just, they disagree with the whole emergence thing, but it's like, to me, if you're an honest materialist, it's like the best way to go about it would be like, that just makes the most sense. Like, add up enough stuff and you somehow get the consciousness. The only issue is consciousness is just the one thing where it's like, it's hard to, you can't even see, observe it, or measure it when you finally do add it up and get it.
Right. And then, you have the philosophical issues like the demarcation problem, the combination problem, like how does just by putting together enough stuff create the genie out of the bottle, so to speak? Like it's sort of like a hand wave in a way. It's kind of like saying, well, we don't know, but theoretically, if we just put enough bricks together, you'll create a wall that thinks. And I think T Jump had a debate with Bernardo Kastrup, and
I think I witnessed that.
yeah, and you remember he was saying about the water pipes. He said if you just put enough water pipes on the earth, they would become conscious. And it's like, I don't know, it sounds weird.
Well, I mean, I think it's not a good analogy. Like, to me, it's like you can't compare water pipes to the building blocks of matter. It's just like because it's like there's just still so much we don't know about subatomic particles and combination of atoms, because it's like we can say, oh, I can't imagine consciousness coming from from matter, but it's like, well, like we get enough atoms together, we get molecules, and if we get enough inorganic molecules together, we get organic molecules, and if we get enough organic molecules together in the right circumstances, we get this thing called life. So I'm just like, so I mean, I understand the critique, but I'm not sure if that's a knockdown critique of materialism.
Yeah, and there's the problem of what is an atom.
Yeah.
So like there's this naive view of the atom, which is like a little marble. And so if you just put these marbles together, kind of like bricks, you create the wall. But actually atoms are not really marbles at all. They're not solid things. They're just fields, actually.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Well, I was just saying, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you better now.
Seems like atoms, from what I understand, atoms are made up of particles which themselves are not little marbles, but they're fields of probability space. So you could put it another way, like by putting a bunch of probability states together, you get molecules. But molecules, if they're made up of these probability states, they're kind of like appearing to us as solid little objects. But upon another perspective, they're not solid objects at all. They're just a combination of probabilities.
You're going in and out, Scott.
Oh, well, okay. see what I can do.
Oh, much better.
Much better now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I was just saying that the we could look at atoms as probability states, and by putting enough probability states together, or that would be the argument. I don't know if putting together even makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
You
it's like,
know.
to me, it's like, so yeah, like what is an atom? Like, that's a very good question. And it's it's still a scientific mystery, because it's like science doesn't really tell us what things are. They just tell us how things do their thing.
How they appear to us, right?
Yeah. And so to me, it's like, when either materialism or idealism, it's like, to me, it's like there has to be more to it than just like saying, oh, if matter itself can bring about life, or consciousness can bring about life. Because to me, it's like, no, like, the if consciousness by itself could bring about life, then it wouldn't take 10 billion years for life to appear on our planet. Same with materialism. It's like, like stuff, there has to be these other forces, like such as entropy. Even if entropy isn't fundamental, it's obviously necessary for life to come about, on planets like such as Earth. And so to me, it's like, it's not self-evident to me that these things on their own, matter or consciousness, can just pop life into existence.
Yeah, because the intuitive mind, just if I'm basing it on intuition, if life is conscious, like if reality is based on consciousness, then there would be no need for time and the passage of time, and like it would just be blinked into experience. That's the intuition. That we think about a God who just snaps his fingers and things happen. Like, why is there why does there need to be a process to it? But that could just be an artifact of our ignorance about how and why we even have the kind of experience we do. Like, why are we the kind of observers we are? Like, maybe that's all part of the dream, so to speak. Like that's the mechanics of the dream. So I guess what I'm getting at is, in a way, it's almost like materialism is true in a way, as an experience, as an appearance that we look at, and you can make sense of it through a materialistic lens. It's just that on another perspective, idealism makes more sense. It just
Yeah, because
depends on where your
yeah,
perspective lies. Yeah.
because it's like, if you're just coming at it from like oh, explain life, or why things are, have complex minds, it's like, well, it's like, to me, it's like, that's not really an issue for materialism. Because it's like, either it's like, given enough time plus these complex interactions, it's like something is bound to happen. And it's like, and that's true of consciousness. Given enough time, it's like this simple consciousness will produce more complex consciousness. It's just, to me, it's like, yeah, you have a much better, it's like, idealism makes more sense when you start to get into like the hard problem of consciousness. Like, that's where to me, where it seems strongest.
Right. And like, emergence is kind of a lacking sort of, like, I think a lot of people are moving away from, it's like it's become a nasty little word. Like, I've seen all these debates, and a lot of idealists or dualists will throw up, oh, we've already know that emergence is this and that, and this the problems, and the materialist interlocutor will say, well, we've already moved away from, now you're straw manning me. Like, they're always kind of fighting against that
Well,
word.
I don't understand it, because it's like, emergence, it has its place. And it's like, when we're talking about almost anything other than consciousness, it makes sense. It's like, you get enough subatomic particles together, you get atoms. You get enough atoms together, you get molecules, and so on and so forth. And so it's like, yeah, emergence is a great tool, a great hypothesis, and it helps us understand the world around us. But then it's like, when you try to get to explaining away experience itself, it's just,
That's where the problem comes in, though. Like, the reason why emergence has become kind of a nasty word in as far as the mind body problem is that it's been sort of beat that dead horse, where what the argument against it was that it's a category error. So like when you combine, certain, like say water, the water molecules, right?
Mhm.
And then it leads to wetness. It emerges into wetness. Well, all of these things we're talking about physical things, like, like a brick. You put enough bricks, you get a wall.
Mhm.
But there's no wallness within the brick. There's just bricks. So when you put enough bricks together, it creates a wall. It emerges into this brand new property. But remember, walls don't exist in reality. They exist in the concepts of the people
Yeah.
who see function, who call this functional thing a wall. So it's very conceptual, which relies on consciousness. So it isn't the same thing. Like, water, these molecules, you combine, hydrogen atoms and this and that, oxygen, and you get water, well, that's more like an objective fact. But wetness, that's sort of an experiential, you
Mhm.
feel wetness. There's no wetness out there. Just like there's no goodness out there or no morality out there. That's all subjective. And that's contained within a conscious experience of it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where the whole analogy breaks down. And so that's why they've kind of backed off from emergence of mind sort of theory. Now there's some people that still do. I think the more popular one though is identity theory. I think that's the one that a lot of materialists sort of gravitated to. You familiar with that concept?
Well, isn't it that I'm sort of familiar with it, and if I'm correct, isn't that where it's like, well, consciousness is real, but it's also physical, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the
So it's
idea.
like it's kind of like we know that the brain is a process, like it's processing. So it's to say that consciousness is what the brain does. So it's like this idea, the argument here is that, you know, when the brain does certain processes, you taste, you feel, you have these things.
Mhm.
And so they're kind of identified as the same way, which oddly enough is idealism in a way. Because that's what we're saying, that exactly. We're identifying consciousness with the processes of nature, but because we're not dualists, we are expressing that same exact idea just on a non-dualistic framework. That way everything is just consciousness,
Yeah. And which
because
I'm very sympathetic towards dualists, because it's like it really is just so intuitive.
it is, man. It is. I'm not even gonna lie to you. And in fact, in my everyday acting life, I'm a dualist. I have to be, and it's also what gives you all meaning of life and
Well,
values and stuff.
and I feel like that's the same way about free will. It's like I know free will doesn't exist, but man, it's like just the way I'm wired. It's like I'm constantly thinking in this free will sort of dynamic.
Yes, bingo. See, that's I had an interview with Brooklyn Lou, another um YouTube content creator, and he's an atheist, and he interviewed me a few days ago, and we
Mhm.
were talking about that, and and then after the show we were talking about it in a little bit more depth, because he was asking a few more questions about idealism and non-dualism, and his whole hang up was, but if you really believe it's non-dual, then why do you care about objects in the world? Like, why would you even care? Like, you could just jump in front of trains and it's no problem. Like, and it's like, no, that's kind of not what it is. It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to explain, is what I found with a lot of people, is they can't really wrap their head around. But it's like you said, it's the same thing. Like I asked him, do you believe in free will? It's like, oh, no, 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 no. I said, well, it's the same thing. You act as though you have free will every day, don't you? He's like, yeah, I do. And I said, but you don't believe in free will? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, how do you reconcile that? And he goes, yeah, that's a good question.
Exactly.
And I said, well, that's exactly where I'm at with this idealism stuff. It's like, it's hard to explain because I act like it's not true in my daily life, but I know it is, but I kind of feel like it is true because it just makes better logical sense to me.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with, it's the exact same argument with free will, you know?
And I mean, I have, and you know, just we've been discussing like the things that don't make sense under materialism, and but to me, it's like when I look at idealism, like I'm still, while I've wrapped my mind much better around the idea of a simple mind, it's still, what still gets me though is, it's like, because if we're going, if you know, if idealism says, oh, we're not throwing away the data of science, we're using science, you know, we're still using science, then to me it's like, well, if that's the case, then I have to come to the conclusion that this simple mind is non-living, and so it's like, well, what the fuck is a non-living mind? You know?
Right. That's a good one, because I kind of feel that way too, and I would just look at it. The what really sold me over a long time ago was when I learned about disassociation, even within your own being, like where you have a person can actually have experiences, feelings, you know, will to do certain things, wants, desires, things like that. But all that's kind of based on your subconscious or your unconscious. And those things though are a form of mind because it's all mental activity, right? But it drives your physical behavior. It drives your feelings about what you do and stuff like that. And so it kind of shows you that, you know, the mind that maybe idealism is talking about, or what a lot of people talk about, I know with me, it's not a human mind. It's not as anthropocentric as we'd like it to be. Maybe it's a little more of a like an unconscious, like kind of like your own unconscious, you know, something you're not really conscious of, but it affects your consciousness. It gives it breathes life into your consciousness. And this makes a lot more sense than inert dead matter doing it, because then we're back to the hard problem again. You know. So for me, it's kind of like there's this mental thingy, you know, that's not human conscious, it's not meta conscious, but it's some sort of mind-like sort of thing that and I would call it like just the probability state, because like, you know, with a thought, like with your subconscious, unconscious thoughts, they house like all these different potentials of behavior and decision making, and it collapses into a particular way because it, you know, you're determined, you know, it's sort of stochastic, and that's how you actually are motivated to make one decision, or you're determined by this underlying mental thing, this unconscious subconscious thing. And so I think that on a universal level it's probably the same way, that there's this, that we're just housed within this unconscious thing, and we're sort of like fractals would maybe analogy you could understand, like it's just an expression of that field, you know, and it's just a potential. You're just living out a particular potential. Anyways, Al is back here.
Hey,
Yeah, what's up, Al?
Oh, food arrived at the same time I logged on. I was just letting you two talk.
Oh yeah.
But no, this is a subject I don't really cover at the moment, but there's too many little rabbit holes to go down.
Oh, it is, man. It is.
I mean, what is the topic that y'all are covering right now?
So science of mysticism. So we're you know, it's all rest on an experience. You know, mysticism is a direct experience, you know.
I'd agree.
So, yeah, and so, you know, I guess the mystics, before science was a thing, they explored, you know, the world, how it works, the metaphysics, the interconnectedness, or at least that's what they concluded through, mystical practices and stuff like that.
It
And
seemed
so
like they had a much better connection with reality, to tell you the truth.
I think so. They had a very experiential, meaningful. They had a lot of meaning embedded within the experience that they could talk about. Science is really short on meaning, and they're more on just behavior,
Yeah,
which is
sounds like
practical. It can be practical because we
And
have to create. It's like science can create the nuclear bomb, but it can't really tell you to use it or not.
yeah, and I
no,
mean, and it's important to understand behavior. So
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very narrow, I don't know, yardstick to measure life by. It measures reality rather well. That's true, but I mean, when it comes to life, I'm going with the mystics. They're cool.
Yeah. The one
well,
thing the mystics have for them is that they acknowledge that this thing we call reality is always going to be inside of our conscious mind. No one's can step outside of consciousness or get behind it in order to objectively evaluate it or define it or anything like that. We are the experience.
It does, and it seems like it's next to impossible to describe.
Hmm.
It's like,
that's I'd say one of the issues I'm having with them.
Which one specifically?
Well, like, so just like with the religious experience, and
Hmm.
you have people of a certain religion saying, "Well, we're the one true religion,"
Yeah.
and there's of course there's the possibility that there is a one true religion. I mean, there's also the possibility that every religion on earth has gotten it wrong, but it's like, so to me, it's like, just like how it's just so hard to figure out, oh, is this religion correct? To me, it's like, it seems mysticism, has that same issue of where it's like, all right, well, there's all these new age stuff, there's all this woo. It's like, so how do you determine what's, in the woo category, and what's, oh, hey, this is the truth, this is real,
Yeah, that's a good question. And
oh yeah,
it's one of the things that requires a lot of listening and studying. And really, like, the one thing about mystics, one sign that you can tell is not woo woo is when a mystic tells you, don't believe me, believe in your own experience. Like or like the real classic mystics, the ones that I would consider are the real mystics, are the ones that make no sort of attributions to their experience. They just tell you what their experiences are. They tell you what the impressions are with the experience, and they are humble enough to say, you know, this is the experience of life that I'm having. And a lot of mystics will tell you that everybody has a mystical experience. It just opening your eyes every morning and facing the world is a mystical experience.
that's true. But with something to add to that, are they trying to sell you something? Okay, they're full of woo woo.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When they try to make money off it and stuff like that, that automatically raises concerns. Cafe says the mysticism is something that is more of a feature of consciousness itself that transcends across religious and cultural traditions. Exactly. That's what a true mystic would tell you, is they'll say we're not dogmatic. We're not about the cultural stories and religion.
yeah, because it's like,
Mhm.
they're going to like, oh, I'm trying to sell you something. It's like, because it's like, whenever I come in contact with mysticism, there seems to always be someone trying to sell me something. Like with Deepak, it's like,
Yeah,
the
books
whole
and
the whole quantum mysticism, where it's just like, people want to just gravitate towards this mystery of quantum mechanics, and insert whatever weird belief they have into that.
it's easy to do
Yeah.
because it's so easy to do because we're talking about, really, mystics are usually non-dualists,
Mhm.
so they go with the idealistic sort of stuff, and they're non-dualist, and so quantum mechanics dualist sort of description of reality. It's sort of non-locality, entanglement. All this is the same thing. So it's so easy for a mystic to gravitate towards quantum mechanics and then start using it as evidence for their, mystical experience or whatever their messages are, right? Which in some ways I can understand why they would do that. And I would say that, yeah, that's kind of like intersecting mysticism with science. That's an example of where they intersect. But it's just that I understand what you're saying too, though. For people that are not aware of quantum mechanics or they're not aware of mysticism, this stuff sort of looks like a selling point, like some sort of bullshit you're trying to push on me.
Yeah.
Like, quantum mechanics is weird, mysticism is weird. Therefore, if you put them together,
And
I understand that,
especially when it's like, when most physicists say, oh, the observer effect, it's like, from a science standpoint, it's like what they're really saying is like there's an interaction happening. It's like, there are certain quantum theories that do state that, it's definitely consciousness that's affecting it, but it's like from the most theories that I've heard of, it's like, no, it's just what causes the collapse, is an interaction of the particles.
Paul asked, "Do you get the number I was sending you, Scott?" I can guess. I'm not a mind reader though, bro.
133.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I win.
I don't think they're about money. Ramana Maharshi, a mystic, would cringe at the sight of money. Okay, well, I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of fakers out there.
There are.
And there's a lot of fakers out there for sure.
But there are people that, they are, it's like they're connected to something. And it's the damnedest thing. Like when a lot of people have a similar experience when they go to the woods, they feel a connection to nature or something, and it's indescribable. And a lot of mystics actually prefer to live on the outskirts of towns and stuff like that, and are close to nature and connected. Why? It's a good question.
Yeah, in India is like I was listening to one speaker who was saying that in India there's a mystic on every corner. Like he was saying, they're always trying to get money. They got little baskets out there and they're talking.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of that, especially in India.
Con artist capital of the world.
And it's it's the same thing with any sort of everybody's trying to capitalize on something. Some people start YouTube videos to talk about mysticism and consciousness just to get views.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Scott, what's that about?
Yeah, what's all that about? Wow, all of a sudden,
you monetized the page, didn't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
No,
actually, you probably could at this point. You got 1,000 views, so
yeah.
I need
just saying. Wink, wink.
Got your side hustle.
Yeah, I need to start a Patreon page where people can donate.
Yeah, we'll do the hardcore shit on there.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You want some real deep shit? Join the Patreon.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
Are any of you guys familiar with Sadhguru?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
very,
probably
very wise man.
I'm probably the least familiar. So.
Okay. Well, I think he's a pretty good mystic. I think he speaks truth. The only thing that raises eyebrows with a lot of people is he started his own, movement, and he gets, he travels around the world giving motivational speeches. He was speaking at the some world summit where all these elites started talking about, we need to depopulate the world because of global warming and shit.
Yeah.
And he was on there supporting all that. He's kind of like one of these guys that I don't know. He's not really. He's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. He says never believe anybody's experience. You should only believe your own experience. So he says a lot of things that a lot of your typical mystics say.
Yeah.
You know, but he does make a lot of money, so that's
Oh God, yeah, he does.
yeah.
I
Hell
got
yeah,
you.
that's
I mean, yes, that raises suspicion, like the Joel Osteen. But I mean, his advice is actually pretty good. He lets you look at things in ways that you never thought you would look at them.
yeah. I mean, he promotes the the typical mystic wisdom teaching. Here I'll try to share something here on that if you're not familiar, Caleb
Yeah,
and
yeah.
audience. I think you'd probably like to see a true mystic or somebody close to a true mystic. I think, even though
He is.
I'm not 100% sure if he maybe has his own agenda, but I don't think so. That's just my own feeling. But here it is.
This is extremely important. If you want to grow, if you want to know, it's extremely important you come to the simple understanding. What I know by experience, I know. What I do not know, I do not know. I do not know is a tremendous possibility. If you destroy I do not know, you destroy all possibilities of knowing. I know any number of teachers around you are going about feeding you philosophies and explanations for everything that is not in your experience. People have been talking about gods and heavens and this and that with great confidence and authority. Have they seen? Are they talking about something they have seen? No, my father told me. Who told your father? His father told him, isn't it? Who told him? His father. I can go on asking this question. Today you see something with your own eyes that happened in Chennai, you go and tell your neighbor, I saw this happening. Your neighbor went and told somebody else. That somebody went and told somebody else. Mouth to ear, ear to mouth, it went through 25 people. Tomorrow morning, you heard the story from somebody. Could you even recognize that you said it? Huh? Just in one day, in 24 hours, this will happen, isn't it? When stories are carried from generation to generation, can you imagine what they could have done? Whichever way your father told you about your God, have you passed it on to your children exactly the same way? Or did you add your masala to it? Did you or didn't you? You did, isn't it? You think your father did not do it? You think he did not do it? He did it, isn't it? You think his father did not do it? In all these thousands of years, only masala, nothing else is left. Please start with this. This is extremely important. What I know, I know. What I do not know, I do not know. If you destroy I do not know, you destroy all possibilities of knowing. The very longing to know, you destroy, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Everybody knows everything. They know where God is, they know who his wife is, they know how many children he's got, they know his birthday, they know his address, they know what he likes for his birthday, everything, isn't it? But they don't know anything about themselves. When you're incapable of knowing anything about yourself, are you capable of knowing about the Creator? Is it possible? Just believe something, you can sleep well tonight. If all you're looking is to sleep well, it's up to you. But if you want to be awakened to new dimensions of experience and aliveness, then stories that solace you are not sufficient. All that's being offered in the name of spirituality generally is just solace. Solace is just psychological survival, isn't it? Yes or no? If you come seeking solace, you just came to the wrong place. Because I'm not here to give you solace. I'm here to disturb you so badly that till you find it, you can't sit, you can't sleep, you can't do anything. You have to know it, otherwise you can't settle. I want you to make you so thirsty that you have to know. This is not to solace you, this is not to put you to sleep. If you feel it's the wrong place, you may leave. It's okay.
So yeah. So that's kind of like Mysticism 101 he's pretty much describing. But it's all about your own experience. And so there's way to get into these transcendental states. And it's not really a belief, it's more like a practice, you might say.
Gotcha.
So,
It is a practice, absolutely, because there are a lot of things that are, I don't know, they're very valuable lessons we need to learn. Like you need to, like he said, be honest. If you don't know, you need to admit that you don't know. Don't just blather off something that give people misinformation. It's like, I don't know, let's go ahead and explore that.
see,
And
this is where science and mysticism sort of intersect, because it's religion that does the whole, we have the monopoly on truth and we know things that we don't know.
But see, that's my issue though. My next issue is this whole intersection of mysticism and science. Is like, but it's like, is that really truly attainable? Like, because we already, if it's all about experience and science can't, explain, experience. It's like, well, how useful is the intersection really?
Yeah, and I would say that the intersection is limited, because they're two different approaches, number one.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're going for different things. Like usually mystics aren't looking for God or looking for the explanation of reality necessarily. They're mainly concerned with impressions on your life, and how to approach life, what attitude to approach life with. That's kind of what these experiences are supposed to really talk about. But with science, you're actually looking for deep answers on just about any and everything. And that's not really true on mysticism. But where they do intersect, you are looking for truth. You are looking for certain answers. And you're looking at it through experience. Science is an experiential endeavor. It's observation,
It is, but at the same time though, it's like I feel like mysticism suffers from like the same thing that psychology suffers from, and that's not to say that psychology isn't useful, but it's like when it's like science is all about that being able to repeat the experiment, and it's like there's so many things in psychology where it's like, oh, we here's this interesting study, but we can't really repeat the experiment. Yeah. It's like, oh shit. And so
psychology is woo-woo. I agree with you.
And so
well, it's also the nature. So it's the nature of our categories too, though. Like we can easily. It's a lot easier to make repeatable predictions and verification for dropping a rock off from a certain distance to kind of measure gravity or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. That's a lot easier than trying to do the same thing for the human psyche. Because we're talking about there's so many factors and so many things involved in that it makes it hard to do that. Yeah. And I think even science has sort of shied away from consciousness for hundreds of years. Yeah. And it's only now, like Christof Koch was saying, it's just that it's a very brand new field of endeavor. So you've got all these books and all these models and explanations at this point.
You ever notice something about the mystics, though? And something with the people that are diehard end all be all science is my God. The mystics are happy, whereas the scientists are not.
Yeah. Well, I could see a scientist say, well, so what? Um, they'd say, we're not in science to be happy. We're in science in order to learn the truth. Something like that.
Mm,
Yeah, but yeah,
okay, but you're not happy.
Yeah. So what good is it? Right?
Yeah.
If it
Oh,
doesn't make you
great.
happy, then what good is it?
Great. You know physics and la-di-da-di-da to put it to use. Does it make you happy? No, all you do is sit and look at a calculator all day. Your life sucks, bro.
Well, not only that, sometimes what you learn is kind of depressing.
Yeah, well, the truth is not to be uplifting. It is a wrecking ball for your reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it makes you a stronger person, and therefore it can make you happier.
Bingo. So that's I think that's what Sadhguru was saying. He's like, if you're here to be consoled, then you might as well leave, because I'm here, I'm like a wrecking ball. I'm here to destroy you. I'm here to make it to where you can't even sit down still. Remember, he was saying that. So he was saying, I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm here to, talk about something else, which is truth. And science is kind of the same way. It's not about your fifis, man. you know, and so there's another commonality they have. It's not about your personal wants, what you want to be true. You're kind of like letting reality dictate itself on its own terms.
Sure, it could be a letdown. Like when I would teach philosophy, a lot of people would drop out because you basically have to learn a new language. And in year one, and then in year two, it's a wrecking ball to their reality, and it shatters their world. They don't want to learn the truth about life and everything else, so they quit.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that Sadhguru guy, he does it in a much more appealing way.
Yeah, especially nowadays, he's a lot easier. Like, he used to be really tough back in the day. He was like really cold about it. But his thinking back then was, I want people to jump in the cold water. Just jump in. Don't dip your toe in. Just jump all the way in. The faster you jump into the cold water and get used to it, the faster you're going to find peace, you know? But it seems like now he's more exposed to a lot of different people, and there's a lot of political correctness going on in the world these days. And so he's got to be he's trying to now lead them in a much gentler way, it seems like. So he started this whole personal engineering philosophy.
Yeah. And if you look at how he's grown throughout the years, I mean, it definitely reflects on it. His experiences that he has, it's what works and kind of what doesn't work. I mean, I'm all for the Marine Corps. Throw that motherfucker in the pool.
Yeah.
But, I'm all for that. But I'll tell you the truth, it's not the best approach in a lot of situations. So,
Right. And it's not really taking into account the challenges that each individual has. Like, there's people that go through so much trauma in life. And so you can't just, like, maybe one guy, he comes from a real sturdy, strong background and has no traumatic, he's been kind of spoiled, spoon fed all his life or whatever. And so he takes things a certain way. Then you got this other guy who's just been beaten all his life, beaten down by life. He's probably not going to respond the same way. He's going to be a little bit more leery about things, and you've got to sort of, to that guy, you're going to have to talk to him in a different way and kind of get him. You're going to to get through to him, it's going to take a different method, I think.
yeah, all humans respond to incentives. So, God, if you've ever been in the military, you come out and you think everybody's a bunch of lazy bums. But and that's what makes it hard to adapt back to life. But if if you realize that point that no, people respond to incentives. Well, Sarge isn't going to kick my ass if I do things right, and it works the same way in, here in the real world.
Well, the only cold water sort of approach that worked for me was when I hit DMT, because by doing DMT, it's like you go through a psychological death, right? And it's not like you inch your way there, it happens immediately. And it's not like you can stop it. You can't like will yourself from it happening. Like once
Now
you ingest that stuff, you're done. Like
you
you think
can't
you're
escape.
dying. Can't escape, and you're just gonna have to go along for the ride. And in the first 10, 15 seconds, you feel like this is it, I'm done. And
It is.
you're crying because you're like, I know I'm dead. I don't know why the fuck I even thought about doing this shit.
Yeah, but
And
it's
but
a
once you
journey.
pass through, then you get through the journey and you get through it, you've learned something. You've experienced something very profound that changes your entire impression of reality. And if anything, it lets you know that your impression of reality just really depends on a lot of stuff. There's not really one true interpretation. Like it can change immediately in the blink
Yeah,
of an eye. And that's what that direct experience does for you. And I've even tried to get people here to do DMT with me, and they're like, no, I'm not doing it because I'm not ready for it.
oh,
I
I'll
don't
be
want
in Florida in about a month.
Well, come on through, man. Let's do it.
Right? Yeah, it definitely brings up everything in your head, and it forces you to confront everything.
Hmm.
And then, but that's a really good thing because a lot of people are too scared to do it.
Yeah.
And once you do it, like I said, the wrecking ball, it shatters your boundaries. So like I could not understand mystics for the longest time. And I'm like, you woo motherfuckers, you lying son of a-"
Hmm.
But yeah, it's amazing if you get your presuppositions out of your head and just look at life as the way it is. It's amazing what opens up to you and what you've been missing. So I think the mystics are on to something.
I mean,
Yes,
I
and I
don't.
think the difference, I think Caleb brought the distinction. He was trying to say, how is that different than the religious experience? In a way, they're kind of the same, but in another way, what a lot of people who have this come to Jesus moment or whatever, they have this attribution going on where they will tell you, I saw Jesus Christ himself, and he said that all the other religions were false, and that everybody, if you're an atheist, you're going to hell, and all of these kind of stuff. It's like it's different. That's different than the mystical experience, because the mystical experience is much more profound and deeper than some comic book, you know, idea of spirituality or something like that. Like
It's
it's
just
ego.
religion's kind of fill a void, and mysticism fills a void in life too. But religion's it's more of a lifestyle that people want to adopt. They're not happy with themselves, so they jump onto this bandwagon. And well, thankfully, most Christianity is halfway decent, although they're still crazy.
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
can't, and I can't say that, I can't promise you I'd become a mystic, but it's like I'd be open to trying DMT. So
Yeah,
I'm telling you, man, come on, let's go to Scott's.
let's do it, man. Let's have
What are
that
you you're in the Panhandle, right?
in the Panhandle, the
Shit,
Redneck Riviera.
yeah, that's gonna be a little ways off of I-10, but I bet at Jacksonville, just shoot on over from there.
Yeah. Hey, Jack Devani, how you doing, man?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Thanks for jumping in, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I was just listening online and I figured I'd jump in. Um, I kind of don't understand what you guys mean by mysticism. Maybe I didn't catch the entire discussion. I just wanted to ask you guys, what does that mean to you guys?
Scott, take that one.
Okay. So mysticism is just all about direct experience without the interpretation. So it's kind of like just the raw impression of an experience that's probably gained through, I don't know, like meditation, hallucinogen, could be off the cuff. Like there's people that that just are sitting, like Christof Koch. We had a video on him, who's a neuroscientist, and he was just sitting there, I think at the beach or something, and all of a sudden he had this transcendental experience. And this transcendental experience is sort of ineffable. So anytime you even try to describe it, you're doing injustice. You're not really saying anything that's meaningful to anybody else. So the mystic would say that these experiences are for you only. Trying to teach other people your experience or whatever turns into dogma, turns into religion. And so most mystics reject that. So they reject attributions like, oh, I got a vision from God or a ghost or the spirits or whatever. A mystic in the traditional sense would say, no, you didn't talk to God. You didn't talk to anybody. You just had an experience that was brought on by reality itself, whatever that means. It's not important to define that part because that's outside of your experience. So the only thing that really matters is your experience. And I guess the mystic, what he can do is he can help people to achieve that transcendental experience on their own. And these things tend to have an impression. In other words, it tends to help people become a different sort of person, a different sort of being altogether. So their approach to life changes from like this dogmatic or religious or very traumatic. It depends on whatever people are suffering with. It's a way to transcend it and to come to peace of mind. That's the whole point, is to find peace. Yeah,
Okay.
so
I get the definition now. Do you think that like being open to like these kind of experiences would be like better than, I don't know, living like a dogmatic life that you're talking about?
depends on who you are. So depends on where you're at in life, so to speak. Like maybe 30 years ago, it wouldn't be a good thing for me. Yeah, I was probably more happy being a dogmatic person.
Mm.
But people change, you evolve, you change, whatever. And then you may find that the mystical approach is better. Better, good, better, values, those are all subjective.
Yeah, the more wisdom you get, the more you can do things on your own. So it's best not to approach it until you're at a certain level, I guess you could say.
And sometimes not. I don't know. It's a really weird thing. Some people have mystical experiences when they're not ready for it. And when it happens, it's because they weren't ready for it that it had such a big impression on their life.
Yes, but then they become a gypsy or some filthy thing like that.
They could, yeah. Or they could come to Jesus or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like I've had these kind of experiences in the past, and honestly, it just led me to like over question if it's possible to like your mind can be like too open, which I think can sometimes lead to like an existential crisis, whereas like nothing has meaning, you know. So I guess I wanted to chime in on that aspect of it because I think there's a I'm not trying to sound like I belong to Dare or something. I just am trying to say like you got to be really careful
Oh
when you
yeah.
open the door because sometimes too much could fall out, you know.
Oh yeah. I agree with you, man. I agree. And that's why I stopped kind of pushing it, because after I had like my own experiences, I made the mistake. I was a naive person, and I used to think everybody needs to do it. Like,
Right.
you only live once, man. You've got to at least try it, no matter what it leads to. At least try it. And I've realized I'm really wrong to do that. I should not
Mm.
really do that. That's kind of a waste of energy, and it doesn't really accomplish anything. I don't even know what I'm trying to accomplish at that point. And so I would say that I wouldn't really. And this whole thing about enlightenment and waking up, I'm not really sure if that's even a good idea for most people. I don't think that's really something we should even try to do. Like, what's so? Why would we want to do that? Like, let's use our imagination. Suppose we actually did live in some sort of computer simulation or whatever, right? And let's suppose that this whole world that we live our life, it's all scripted out. If that was truly the case, why would you, as an avatar of somebody else in some other dimension that's playing this game, why would you want to preach that it's a simulation? Because it seems like the whole point, if I put on a VR headset to play a game, the whole point is so I can get immersed in the game itself. I'm not in the game so that I can be out of the game. You know, like, what's the point? Like, the whole point is to live your life and have your experiences and let them mean what they mean naturally.
Bingo.
You know,
You don't think that the desire for truth is like an integral part of existence, and
could be.
perhaps like, yeah, perhaps like, if that were true, we're in like just a computer simulation, that maybe there's like some deeper part of ourselves that just longs for truth, like capital T truth, you know?
Yeah, I know,
It's
and
it's
I
worth
agree
it.
with you. It's subjective, and unfortunately, I have that problem. I like to be open-minded so much to where I want to really know the truth, no matter what it says. And I'm not even sure I really, I'm not, I'm. You know how they say you have to be careful what you ask for.
Yeah,
Would you think
but
you can help it?
it's
No,
worth
I don't think
exploring.
so. I think we're determined.
Yeah.
Like me and Caleb, at least,
Yeah.
we're both determinists. So, which is in line with my other philosophy of, I have a more non-dualistic sort of philosophy. So I feel like we're just part of nature. We are nature, in a way. So we're just doing what nature, we're a process in nature. And it's just that because we don't have omniscience, like I can't tell the future or whatever, it seems like all my decisions and choices are off the cuff, and I'm really have this free will thing going on. But I think what's really going on is I'm probably determined to unfold the way I'm supposed to in reality. It's just that the beauty of it is I don't know what that unfolding is. And so it seems like I'm making a decision. It seems like I'm making a choice, which I guess I do believe in free will in an embodied sense, because I don't jump in front of trains and shit. you
Oh,
know?
and Scott, to go off your like, oh, it's like, do we want to even be enlightened? Like, to me, the other thing about taking psychedelics or DMT, it's like not everyone has the same experience. It's like some people will have a great experience, and some people will just have the absolute worst experience. And it's like,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
if you're one of those people who have the absolute worst experience, well, there's really no point in you continuing, taking psychedelics.
You just never know what's going to come.
Like a
But
box of chocolates, baby.
right, but Jack, actually, that does tie into the mysticism, and you need to explore your life and find out what exactly works for you. It makes you become a whole person and everything. And when I mean, I'll highly encourage you to run face first into a tree. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But and it's gonna happen, and we're going to laugh. But
Yeah.
you need to laugh too, and it's
Yeah.
just you
Well,
will run into things that a lot of woo woo shit and a lot of some things are really actually will really be profound to you.
well,
So don't be scared to explore it.
I also wonder how related someone's experience is to someone's culture, because it's like when when I learned about schizophrenia, it's like it's only in places like the United States where you have a very bad schizophrenic experience, where in other cultures across the world, it's like the voices are very soothing. They're very kind to you. It's only like in the United States where like it's very negative and like you can have negative outcomes.
Life is too easy in Western cultures, and they got too much time on their hands, so they create monsters in their head and import third worlders and la-di-da-di-da, but we're not going to go down that train. Yeah, there's no kidding. Yeah, people in the West have driven themselves insane.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's I'm just one of those people that I don't know, as I getting older, I just don't really care to not take risk. Like, it's like I was an atheist for so long, and it's like I was just really comfortable and satisfied with all the usual talking points and belief, sound bites or whatever, like, oh yeah, this and that, whatever. There's millions of them. And then it just got to the point where, well, why don't you try some shit yourself and figure it out on your own? Like, why just go off what you've ever read or hear all the time in your echo chamber? Why not just try to see if what these mystics or religious people are saying? I've already tried. Luckily for me, I tried religion first. And so I got that out of my system. That's what led me to the atheism. But then, I started getting curious about mysticism and things like that. And a lot of some atheists were mystics. In fact, I realized that most mystics are atheists. And so that kind of threw me for a loop.
Yeah.
The same thing with Buddhists. I realized most Buddhists are atheists. I met a Buddhist priest, and I used to always try to argue with him about God years ago. And he's always like, why do you keep trying to argue with me about God and spirits and stuff? I don't believe none of that. And I'm like, wait. And I could never hear him when he says that, because I just had this whole atheist script written out. If you're a religion, you believe in this Abrahamic sort of God or whatever, Sky Daddy. And then I realized that, guess what? Not all religions actually believe in that shit. And they have other things they believe in that I had no idea. I was ignorant. And that's when it started really clicking with me. Like, maybe I'm overconfident. Maybe I'm the arrogant one. And I think that all you motherfucking religious people are just dumbasses. Like, maybe
Well,
I'm
how can
wrong
we
on
know
that.
what's true? How can we know what's true or not?
Yeah. My guide is epistemology. But again, epistemology is working within a framework. You've got to pick your framework. So what I kind of came to, Jack, is that every model, every theory about reality or worldview is based on some sort of um, boundary condition. So there's always something that can't be explained. There's always some assumption based on your framework. And even if you were to explain your axiom or your assumption, you would then need to explain its axiom and assumption. And it just goes on infinitum. And so every view is just a framework. And I guess the best you can do is just make sure that whatever framework you choose to believe in, that it's at least internally consistent, that it's not impossible.
So this is one of the things that I was thinking about because I'm an attorney, and I have always just encountered that people just kind of believe in whatever they want. You know, there's no real rhyme or reason to it. I used to think that there was, and that people generally thought the same. But when it comes down to it, we really don't. And we don't really have any other reason for why we believe in what we believe, other than it convinces us. And I don't even think we're in control of that. I don't think we
Right.
can control what
No,
convinces us
no.
or
Mm-mm.
doesn't.
It just
Um,
does.
and sometimes, like, people may not believe a witness or a client or have a certain opinion about somebody just based on what they look like, or maybe their biases about their race or their socioeconomic condition. And if that's just how people think, then I thought to myself, well, how can I trust what I think or my own views? And I realized that it's just a result of my conditioning, how I grew up. Um, that things, certain ideas or certain um, ways of thinking made sense to me, and others didn't. but I couldn't say with any kind of like certainty that my way was the correct way, which kind of led me to like this existential crisis of, well, I don't know anything, you know.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's why I kind of wanted to join in, because like I do like, you know, mysticism, and I do read a fair bit of, you know, ancient philosophers and ancient mystics and stuff, like the Desert Fathers, or like the
Mm,
Dhammapada, the saying of the Buddha,
mm-hmm.
or like there's some really cool like Persian poets in the like 13th century, like Hafez or Sadi, and I don't know. I like that stuff, but I don't know if they're right or not. Does that make sense? I don't know if
Makes
I'm
a
Yeah.
lot of sense,
like
man.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I
no.
don't know if
That's a
I'm
really good point.
explaining
That's a
it
really good
correctly.
point. No, you
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
are. And it
As
even
long.
reminded me, like, can we, I would want, even like you said, you're an attorney, like with the judges, like even the judge himself, how do we trust the judge? Like,
Oh,
I want to
yes.
make sure the judge is well fed before he makes his
Exactly,
Oh
Scott.
yeah,
There's
absolutely. I mean
that
that's a
study.
true thing.
Yeah, that study
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
lunch.
Yeah. If you don't have lunch, um, I think it was like, if you've already had lunch, like you're more likely to find the person like innocent. But if you
Yeah.
haven't, and it's like the first thing in the morning, you're probably more likely to find them guilty. And like just
Guilty.
a person's hormone levels, whether or not like they just gone through like a stressful episode in life, or like whatever they're going through personally, or they're hungry or thirsty, or they could be on some kind of like Ozempic or something, right? And
Yeah.
that might even affect
Yeah.
their moral choices. So like, I don't know, it just seems like there's no real objective reality out there, and
That's
it's our
right.
opinion. Yeah.
So
Well, Jack,
that that's
there is objective reality. It just
access,
there's
bro.
also subjective reality as well, and you live in a world of subjective reality due to your job. But all these different philosophers and things that you're looking into, they're just remember that they're guides throughout life. Your end goal is always find you.
And
Okay,
also
and
too, you can sort of like, that's what all of this sort of what led me to being an idealist, naturalist, agnostic. So I always put agnostic there because I have to admit that I don't really know. And that's kind of the point, is that the only thing that I know is real is the experience. I'm having an experience. I think, therefore I am. That's the only thing I can say for sure, is that I am conscious of an experience. Otherwise, I couldn't be sitting here talking about it. Um, but that attribution, what the reality really is, outside of consciousness, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have any idea. It's like you said, how would you really have access to the objective reality when you're stuck in your own head, which is, so fickle? Like, everybody's so different. We all have our own subjectivity going on. So the only objective thing that I really anchor myself to is consciousness. And that's how I'm defining idealism. It's the only thing I know. It's the only thing I can, it's my only access to the outside world is through my conscious experience. But whatever it is I'm experiencing, I don't have access to that. I only have access to the phenomenon of experience. I don't have access to this so-called objective world that supposedly exists. So I just say I'm an agnostic about that part, but I am an idealist about the epistemological part, that all I know and the only way I can know anything is through experience.
Well, I have a question about consciousness. So suppose, like, you've heard of Phineas Gage?
Yep. We were just talking
Yeah.
about that earlier. Yep.
Okay, cool. So
So
if we're like just a conscious mind, right? That I guess that's how we perceive the world. The fact that like his brain got injured, and then like
mhm.
he had like a new personality afterward. Like, why would his consciousness be affected if his like if he's just a conscious mind that like inhabits a body? But like, shouldn't I don't understand like traumatic brain injury and how it relates to
Yeah.
consciousness.
Very good question. I'm glad you brought it up because we actually talked about that earlier. So we were watching a video between a Christian dualist and a non-dual idealist. Both of them are neuroscientists, right? So the idealist, so the non-dualist, Christian believes in the soul, that there's this soul that is really mediating the conscious experience. And the brain really has no role in that. It's just there for some reason. And if you tweak the brain in certain ways, you can change experience, but in other ways you cannot. And where it cannot relies on the soul, right? Well, this is the idealist position is no. Look at Phineas Gage when he had that traumatic, injury with that pole going through his head. It changed his entire personality. That when you change the brain, you change the conscious experience. That's what idealism says, right?
Well, is he the same person?
Yeah, he's even a different person. So your personhood it can be changed and altered just by changing the physical, the appearance of the
But wouldn't
physical
that lead?
brain.
Wouldn't that be a materialistic position?
It's also a materialistic position. So that's where the idealists and the materialists can agree. And so
Okay.
I'm always correcting people. Like a lot of materialists will come to me and they always bring that up. That or similar sort of things, and we agree on that. And they're really surprised that we agree on that. So then the next question is, well, why do we agree on that? If you're saying that consciousness is the fundamental, and we're saying that matter is the fundamental, then how is it that we can agree on that particular thing? And so we were kind of they were debating that, and he was kind of breaking that down as well. So there's this thing called disassociation. And Christof Koch was going through, the whole idea, and the dualist was disagreeing. But basically, we can see evidence that even within your own being, there can be different persons in your own brain. Like there's split brain patients who one side of their brain could be an atheist and the other side could be a Christian or something, right?
Yeah, I heard that when like epileptics, I think it's epileptics, like
Yeah.
there's a surgery for them where they I think they cut the corpus callosum, and it's like their left side of the body and the right side of the body are like kind of controlled by like two distinct things or
Yeah.
entities or something.
Right.
I don't know the right terminology, but
So what the idealist does, the move that the idealist makes is that we just simply extend that universally. So we say that the entire experience is a process of disassociation. So like you're a different conscious stream of consciousness and a different person than me and Caleb and Paul, hey Paul, and Al and people like that. We're all disassociated, but we're all part of the same reality, the same being, right? And so it's no surprise. And then, when we look at the disassociation boundary, when we see, like if I were to see you physically, or I see you guys as icons on the screen, that's just how you appear to me. Because I can't see your internal experience. I can only see your outward appearance. So within idealism, the reason there's this disassociation is because within this greater reality, the reality creates these different experiential beings like you, me, dogs, cats, bats, aliens, what the fuck ever, right? And they're all having their own internal experience. Well, even your internal experience looks like something from a disassociated boundary. So your brain is what your experience looks like from a third party sort of, and I mean materialists say the same thing essentially. It's just that we call it an appearance in consciousness because everything's within our conscious experience. We don't have access to the objective world. Hey Paul, do you want to kick in on this? He's also an idealist.
Oh yeah, hi. Hang on, am I muted or am I?
No, you're good. I can hear you.
Hey, Bo.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I field this argument so often in the forums. Somebody will come in when I've been either defending idealism or asking somebody else to defend materialism or something, and this line this line of argumentation, yeah, not necessarily that specific guy, but it can be like, well, if you take a drink, it'll affect your consciousness. If you get a hammer to the head, it'll affect your consciousness. You know, brain damage affects your consciousness. Drugs affect your consciousness. There's so many different things that some of us assume are physical that affect your consciousness. But the problem is that assumption. You have to come in a priori with the idea that the brain is a physical object, that whatever's interacting with the brain is itself a physical object, and therefore you've got some kind of evidence that interactions between physical objects cause changes in mentation. Yeah, which means that you're starting off from a position that's saying idealism is not true. You're already saying that, you know, it's not possible that these things are just processes in consciousness. They are physical items with their own standalone, mind-independent physical existence. So if you're taking that a priori, how on earth are you going to use any kind of argument which spits that out as your conclusion as well, without completely begging the question? You have to insert those physicalist priors in order to get physicalism to come out at the other end. If you don't take any assumptions, then basically you've got one system interacts causing a difference in a further system, and that just doesn't tell you anything. You could take consciousness, impacts and impinges upon another process in consciousness, and, you know, there's your system interaction there. And oh look, we assumed idealism, and idealism came out in the conclusion. Yeah, so like messing around with that fella, that Gage fella, or anything really that you just assume is physical that affects consciousness, to say, look, this proves materialism, this proves emergentism, this proves that. It's not proof of anything of the kind. It's just a question begging circular argument. It's the reason we don't see the assumption is to us is like water to fish. The assumption that we're physical beings in a physical world, just like, I mean, it's not quite indoctrinated, but like, we're taught science at school without being taught philosophy of science. And so in the gaps, you've got this indoctrination coming through that you're learning, you know, all the scientific models, the elements of those models are the elements of reality itself. And so we get this impression that it's just a scientific fact that we're physical beings in a physical world. And that's not necessarily the case. It's a metaphysical assumption.
Robs you of life.
Sorry, what was that?
No, and I was just saying, when that's all people learn, it just robs them of the experience of life.
Yes.
It downplays experience. It makes experience meaningless. It's like in the philosophy of science, it's that one philosophy, and it's kind of old, but a lot of people, especially in the forums, like you said, they still hold to this old argument, and it's the verification principle. That, you know, the only thing that means anything is what you can measure, that you can predict, and that you can verify repeatedly. That's all that matters. Yet, how do you do that with the verification principle?
I used to get down on the atheist shits, as I like to call them. And because it's like for one, they're not atheists, but story for another time. But I used to tell them all the time, wrong yardstick. It's the wrong yardstick, man. You are measuring a God, life, and everything else by your science. Well, you're missing out on a lot, bro.
Well, you know, the thing is that oh, I'm sorry, I kicked Paul out. Damn it. Paul, come on back, man. I didn't know. I thought that was an extra screen up there, frozen. Just trying to tweak it out. So call back, Paul. I'm sorry for that, brother.
There was some guy who was rushing off. I think it was late.
Yeah, Dave, I think he had to be right. He said he'd be right back. I wanted to make sure he got his
But
question answered, but go ahead.
Scott, tell me this: when you were an atheist, I'll actually buy that you were an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's very few people I will, yeah, but was your life like really miserable during that time? Be honest.
My life has always been miserable. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean it's relative. I mean I probably had miserable times, but I can say, if to answer your question, I would say that I'm probably a lot more
Okay.
happier now, like more peaceful, at peace with things
Yeah.
now, not because I have any belief in an afterlife or anything like that, but I think I've come to embrace non-dualism very intimately. And so what I've kind of learned is that when you treat people with respect and you treat them like extensions of yourself, um, it all comes back to you, number one. But number two, it makes you feel good, and it makes me feel I have more meaning in life thinking about it that way. So I guess I could be an atheist and be a non-dualist and have that same benefit. I don't think the atheist part has much to do with that. I think the atheists just usually, they're two things: they're skeptics and they're dualists. And so those are the two things, or the one thing, the dualistic part may be affecting them, as far as, because there's no real, they don't see the accountability or the value in non-dualism. That could be what's going on. But again, all of this stuff is subjective and it depends on the person.
Yeah, because for me, like, my journey to atheism, where it's like that whole question of meaning, and if the world is just particles, then there's no meaning and all that. But it's like, to me, like that sense of meaninglessness to me came from my theistic upbringing. Like that whole, like, if there is no God, then everything is pointless. And it's like, so to me, that like stepping away from religion and then going, oh no, there's no meaning. It's like, to me, that's due
Yeah.
to theistic baggage and not necessarily because
Now
of materialism.
I actually was a lot more happier as an atheist than a theist. I can say that. Because when I was,
Agreed, because theism is fake.
it's fake. I felt fake. I felt not genuine. I was always struggling with doubt. And they used to always tell me that, oh, everybody struggles with doubt. It's normal. But then I realized I don't doubt that my mom exists. I don't doubt that my sister exists or anything like that. So why am I doubting that your God exists?
I just look at it as people have different IQs, and whatever works for them. And you're just a fucking prick if you go in there and try to chop apart their lifeboat.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
I don't know. I still like a good fight, but I'm
know,
not
me
on
too.
these Facebook groups anymore because it just turns me into a horrible person.
Yes,
I
it
know.
does. But
I'll be honest with you. I used to get a big dopamine rush every time I used to own Christians or whatever.
Okay, now Pat is not off. Okay, we run into Pat. Okay, we got to kick him
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Like I enjoy arguing with him.
Yeah.
I've been kicking him around for 15 years. That boy just will not quit.
He just wants more, don't
Yeah. Feed me, master.
he? He likes it. He's asking for it.
Yeah.
He's like that rape victim.
I know Pat personally. Actually, he stopped talking to me when I started hanging out with the Mormons, and well, whatever. He'll get over his period, whatever.
Yeah.
Eventually.
And I like Christians. I'll be honest with you. Something I realized by being here in Florida, I actually enjoy going to the bar, having a drink with my Christian friends more than my atheist friends.
Well, I mean,
Oh, yeah. They're
as an
happy.
atheist, I can tell you, atheists can be fucking insufferable.
They are, man.
Yeah.
They're just so argumentative, man. It's like, dude, chill. Like, I get it. You don't believe in X, Y, and Z. I get it. Like, I've been there, dude. I've been there, done that.
It's like,
Like,
are
I
you
get it.
always on the clock like a goddamn Christian?
It's
I
like,
want to talk about your disbelief, and I don't want to hear about their woo-woo bullshit
dude,
beliefs.
man,
Drink a
I hate.
fucking beer and have some fun.
I've really tried to
Yeah.
hold back from saying this from so long, but I'm just gonna say it now that we're talking about it. It's like a lot of these atheist type guys that I know. It's like they're on some kind of crusade or something.
Yeah.
It's like, I get it, but it's not the end of the world when people disagree with you on that topic. It's
Their
like,
whole
can we talk-
existence is,
can we-
I'm right.
It's like, can we talk about what we have in common? Like, we have so much in
Yeah.
common, but
I
it's
mean-
like they don't want to talk about that. They just want to browbeat you or something. I don't know.
Well,
And it's the
like-
same thing with these fundamentalist Christian types, though.
I
They're
mean,
the same way.
Yeah,
I'll admit I was that way with my 20s. So.
It's like, I understand where, angry, outspoken atheists come from, because it's like, it's usually due to them having gone through
I
this
know.
trauma. But it's like, at a certain point, it's like,
Right.
you gotta
Caleb.
start. Yeah.
Caleb.
Point on the doll where God hurt you. Okay.
There's
It's
nothing
like,
about
shut
me that
Yeah.
should make them feel like they have to be that way. Like, I'm the most, like, I'm not even disagreeing with their atheism. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I
But
get
it's
it,
like-
because it's like, I have spoken with so many other atheists, and it just always ends up with them being complete dickholes to me. And I'm just like, but we're both atheists here, and it's just, and it's just, that just tells you, though, that to me, what's more important is what someone's values are, not their beliefs. Because it's like,
what do you do?
Thank you. Thank
it's
you.
like, I have Christian friends, Muslim friends, and it's like, it's because we have shared values. It's like, you could be an atheist, and you could be a complete scumbag, and I don't want anything to do with you. It doesn't matter that we both don't believe in God.
I said that all the time. I was like, I'll take a Christian neighbor over an atheist any day.
Any day of the week. Dude, let me tell you what, man. Like, all my Christian friends, they know me enough to know that they don't really even want to talk about the topic. They
Same.
know me enough. Like, it didn't even take them that long to figure it out. And they're like, well, I don't want to talk to you about it. Because they know, and I don't even want to talk to them about it, because I don't want to be that guy, It's like, that's not my point. Like, my point is just to express my views on my channel and still be open, and still be really cool about it, But it's like, with the atheist friends of mine, they're just so, it's like, that's the first and last thing they talk about with me. It's like,
God doesn't exist. Yes, we know that. Shut up.
I know. like fuck.
Yeah.
Well, but here in idealism, they's got to bring it up. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Really want to argue this? We've been over this like a million times. You want to do this again? Really?
I hate to say this, but the majority of them, that's why I call them atheist shits, is they're not atheists to begin with. They're state worshipers. Watch, every one of them votes Democrat. But it's I'm serious, and I'm just like, if you're an atheist, you can actually disprove there is a God. That's really, really simple.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that your whole life is meaningless. You can't have joy. You can't have all this other stuff. It's like,
but
you're
Al,
the most insufferable fucks.
Maybe you said something right there that is the answer, Al. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe the atheists are filling a void of meaning, hope, and purpose, and they've simply changed. Because usually, and actually, another thing that's really weird is that all of my atheist friends used to be really strong Christians, evangelical, fundamentalist.
Okay, so God hurt them in some way, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So God fucked them over. So maybe now they are trying to find hope, meaning, and purpose in their atheism crusade.
Which is just a total wrong-headed way of going about it. It's like,
thank you.
There is no meaning in atheism. Like, my atheism doesn't do shit for me.
Right.
No, it's just simple. It's like I don't have the capability of belief. Sorry, I got a disability.
Yeah,
Sue me.
exactly.
Which is why to me it's like, well, going back to like finding meaning, it's like, to me it's like the whole that whole existential dread that I faced after becoming an atheist. It's like that had to do with you know, God being everything. And to me it's like, so to me it's like I was eventually able to find meaning and realize, oh, I can make my own meaning in life. And so it's, for me it's like, I guess it just depends where you are in life, but to me it's like, whether I believe in materialism or idealism, that's really not going to affect my whole, you know,
No,
stance
that's
on
not
meaning.
going. Yeah, that's not going to give you meaning either. What's going to? I think that what would give you meaning, whether you're a materialist or an idealist, would be a non-dualist way of looking at the world, possibly. But that's questionable
Well,
because there's a lot of dualists who find a lot of meaning in life.
yeah.
So
Well, to me, it's like, if you're a materialist and you're just one of those insufferable materialists of like, oh, everything is just reducible to fucking subatomic particles. It's like, well, yeah, you know, you're missing the big picture. You know?
Yeah,
It's like, to me, like reducing everything down to its most fundamental parts is just, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's just,
it's reductionism.
yeah, it's just, you can't find any meaning in that, like any source of guidance. Like, you, to me, like, what's important about finding out that we're stardust or whatever is that everything is made out of this stuff. It's like we're so interconnected. That's the important takeaway for me. Like, it's
Yeah,
not,
I fear that a lot of the teachings that people are getting nowadays, including you and I, Scott, we're like the same age, and a lot of it lacked purpose and meaning and all of that. Like, you know, you take calculus, for instance. What the fuck are you going to use calculus for in life? Well, look at that lagoon pool and figure out how much water's in it. Look at that field. That way you know how much land you have to farm. But they don't teach those things. They don't let you your mind expand. It's just this
Well, it's just
pounded in
it's over
nonsense.
it's oversimplification and it's kind of a
Yeah.
distortion. And that's what really gets me about the arrogance of it. It's like reductionism can really lead to oversimplifying complex phenomena, especially like consciousness and stuff. And it sort of distorts the overall picture. Like, for example, if you focus solely on genetics when studying alcoholism, for example, you might neglect the influence of social and environmental factors. You know, why are you
Yep.
just going to stick to one thing, you know, and then like for all we say about emergence is something we see in the world, like say like complex systems, they do exhibit like emergent properties, right? Like characteristics of a whole thing cannot be predicted from studying its individual parts in isolation. That's the whole principle behind
chaos
emergence.
theory.
Yeah, chaos theory. But if a reductionist would have a problem because they're focusing only on individual components, and that's going to always fail to account for the emergent behaviors, you know, every time.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued by these mystics.
Yeah,
It's
man.
like something magical. You look at them and it's just like, God damn it, I wish I could be like that. You know, look, you know Sammy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she's one of those. And it's like, why the hell can't I go through life like that?
Oh,
That,
yeah.
that must be nice.
Yeah, you know, my sister, she's kind of like that. Like what happened to my sister is she had near death experience. She had 3 of them actually, near death experiences. And so now she like, you know, she has crystals and, you know, seance. I mean, not seance, but what do they call them? Those, you know, candles or whatever
Yeah.
type of
Dream
things. Kind of
dream catcher on the wall and all that.
clear the energy out of the room or whatever. And, you know, like, I don't really resonate with that. I'm not saying she's wrong or anything like that. Maybe there's some kind of aspect to it that I'm missing or whatever, but I just don't. It's just I'm not wired. But neither was she. But ever since she had the near death experiences, she's become very sort of had these woo woo sort of approaches to life, you know. And so she's always like listening to people, and we talk sometimes. She really resonates with a lot of idealism too. But the part she doesn't really like is this, you know, maybe the soul stuff and the dualism and stuff like that. It's probably a little bit hard for her to get, but you know, because her experience was that she left her body, so she saw the dualism. She saw her body, just like you see like a car riding down the road. You know, you see you here and that there.
Did that
So
once.
when she had her NDE, she saw her body from another perspective, and then she spoke to God and all this other stuff that really just. So there's a lot of things about idealism she doesn't really connect to her own experience, but I've tried to make the connection. Like there's a way you can look at it to where it makes sense, but for her, she just sees the impression was really strong that, you know, I'm not saying I'm a Christian or a Muslim. I think the God I saw was more like this deistic sort of God. And, you know, but the dualism part, I did see that there is a soul that comes out of your body, and your body's like this machine part, and you're like this little man that drives your body around like a fucking soccer mom.
Yeah.
Shit.
And it's scary as fuck when you get that out of body experience. I don't ever want to do that again. But
Yeah. You've had
or
that
for
before?
anybody. Yeah, we were huffing nitrous hoppers when I was like 15, and yeah. And so I literally was floating above myself. I was like, what the fuck? Okay, we ain't ever doing that shit again. but no, it's something else. And it's actually, I don't know if it's good or not good to have those types of experiences, but it definitely opens a door to other things.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, some people are just stupid, but you know, it's kind of polite not to tell them they're stupid, and you want to enjoy your crystals and your dream catchers. Okay.
And like
Well, you
Orlando
ain't
had
hurting
him on
nothing.
the show not long ago, and he had an NDE and near death experience, and he's an idealist, so he's kind of made sense of that whole thing.
How?
So not sure. I mean, you know, we're disassociated, so I'm not really sure. So, you know, like on the idealist story, when you die, your ego is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. But the phenomenal consciousness, you know, that consciousness part of you just goes back to the potential, you know, back to whatever the, you know, fundamental reality is, which is some sort of consciousness, but it's not a meta consciousness. It's not like a self-reflecting sort of thing. So I'm not really sure how the NDE fits in that scenario. It seems like you just don't exist anymore, basically. But I don't know. I don't have all the answers, and I don't think all these people are necessarily lying when they have these NDEs. I think it's kind of like I think it has little to do with their dying body as much as it is with their ego death. I think the ego death is what brings on the experience when you're at that traumatic point in your life. You may not be on the operating table at all. You might just be hitting DMT, or you may just be undergoing like severe trauma.
Yeah.
And you can have this NDE sort of experience. And I think that's probably the way I would understand it, rather than actual soul lifting off and going to some heaven. You know, that's just me though.
You hit on a good point though, where it's like you don't believe that they're lying. And to me, it's like, even though I'm not convinced of religious or mystic experiences, it's like I'm not saying you're lying. It's just, I have no access to your experience, and I've never had these experiences. So it's like I can only
Yeah.
just be like you
Can't
had
talk, right. Can't say much.
you
Right.
experienced something, and I'm not going to say what you experienced was true or false. It's just I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, and then the whole idea of an experience being true or false seems to be a weird statement. Like, I can't say, even if my experience of, let's say I had an experience of God, right?
yeah.
And I said, well, was my experience true or false? That doesn't seem to be a good question.
Yeah.
it seems like maybe the question should be, well, was your attribution correct?
Yeah. Like
the
what
experience itself was probably true.
Like the real question is like, what were you actually experiencing?
Right.
Yeah, what do you compare it to?
Exact bingo. That's right.
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I mentioned the woods earlier, and I don't know how the hell you can compare it to anything else. It's just the most utter peaceful. I don't know. It's like you're just melting into the cosmos, if you will.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the hell do you compare that to anything else?
Right.
Sure ain't a Big Mac.
Right. Exactly. It's ineffable, man. And I've had that experience quite a few times. So I know it's a real experience itself, at least for me. As to why I had the experience, was it a brain function thing, or was it just the nature of consciousness when your brain kind of shuts down certain ways, like the filter theory, like your brain is kind of filtering your experience, which I think is true, makes sense at least. That could be what's going on. That, when you take a certain drug, it'll quiet your brain down, and that will allow you to. And look at the this is a scientific thing. Have you ever heard of synesthesia?
No.
So synesthesia is when a person goes through brain damage, and then all of a sudden, immediately, they're able to do high functioning mathematics, or they can play.
Oh, good.
Oh, I've heard about that. Yeah, like they know a completely different language somehow.
Yeah, the guy that draws New York City with just looking at it. Yeah,
exactly. Like
that guy's cool.
It's almost like it's correlated to the brain, so the brain plays a role in this, but the role that it plays is kind of counterintuitive, because instead of the brain expanding, the brain gets damaged, and certain parts of the brain just no longer function. And when that happens, all of a sudden, maybe some other part of the brain opens up, and then they're able to get all this information from the world that they didn't have before. And then overnight, without learning, like how we have to go and take music classes to learn how to play piano, these people can listen to a track and then play it right there beautifully.
What you're saying, Scott, is that all of us should get brain damage.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm trying, but alcohol doesn't work quick enough.
It's the wrong drug. Alcohol gives you another experience, but it's not the one that.
It's like, I don't know. I agree with Caleb there. No, we're going to take a hammer to our heads after this. But I mean, it really is amazing, and it does make you think sometimes. It's just like, how the hell did this shit happen, man? This is just too fucking perfect.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's like, these aren't like anecdotes. These are like real scientific. Like, that movie, The Rain Man, like he's an autistic savant. Yeah, like these savants and stuff. They're like, part of their brain doesn't work, but then it opens up some other side that they become a genius at certain things,
Yeah, tell me what happened on July 4th, 1974. Weird.
At 3 o'clock in the morning or 3:05 in the afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, wow. Okay. But it's pretty neat thing, these little outliers in life. One thing I would like to understand, the mystics might be onto this. How the hell do you keep getting good trips?
Yeah. Well, the thing that Sadhguru, he's against smoking weed and ingesting.
Well, he stalks.
Yeah, like that part I don't agree with. You're wrong on that one, because I like it.
I will drink. Fuck you.
Yeah, I won't do that. Caleb, you've never had any sort of hallucinogen ever?
No. It's one of those things where it's like, like I'm pretty straight laced, and I'd say that's probably due to my Catholic upbringing. But it's like
Mhm.
I'm you would think, oh, I'm against this or that. It's like, no, it's like I'm pretty libertarian when it comes to, you know, if you want to ingest that, go for it. Just don't be harming other people. And it's
Right.
like I would be totally for experiencing some sort of psychedelic trip. I have not had this opportunity for myself.
Right.
Well, end
Yeah.
of July. I mean, if you're somewhere around I-95, okay.
Well, that's right. And Cafe was right. Sadhguru's excuse is he's always high somehow. Anyways, I mean, his eyes are always glazed.
Yeah, he's high on life, I guess.
Yeah, he is.
Must
That's
be
what he
nice.
says. He's like, I don't need any substance. I can reproduce it in his own experience. That's what his
I
excuse
find the
is.
older I get, the more it's that is the way. Oh, but you know, it's like, come on, man, you gotta have a trip every now and then.
Yeah.
I want to go swim through the grass. God damn it.
Hmm. Dude, I mean, the reality that we have no choice but to experience is rough sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And
I guess. I'm not
it can
saying
be.
Yeah. I
it's just a part of life.
It is. And sometimes you have to manage it somehow. And sometimes that just means you have to get away, take a vacation.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just, I mean, I don't think it's contradictory. That it's like sometimes I feel insignificant. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm one with the world. I'm, you know, with
Hmm.
this.
And who knows? You wake up one day feeling good, and next day you
Yeah,
won't.
yeah,
That's just weird. I
yeah.
don't know. I think we focus too much on just trying to control things and just stop accepting
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, the principle of unattachment. That's right. Um, the
Well, I
more
don't
you
mean disassociate it. It's just, well, okay, this is what today is about. All right, I'm going to be cranky.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's like sometimes I just don't feel like doing anything when I wake up on a Saturday or a Sunday. And
No, I didn't.
I learn to listen to my body, man, because sometimes if you try to force it, you're just ruining your experience.
Yeah, I was feeling terrible last Saturday, and man, I really wanted to jump in with Sophia. That was the only time she ever made sense.
I can hear her now. Whatever, Al.
You get all grumpy.
Yeah,
Sophia and I
whatever,
like
Al.
to fight.
Yeah, man. She's a tiger, man.
Well, I'll
That's why I
bring up.
like her, man. I
She,
love
yeah,
Sophia, man.
she's not afraid to
She don't
speak her
take no
mind.
shit.
That's right. She's a proper black woman.
Yeah,
And
I
got her
love
real
that.
hair too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. But yeah, do you have any other comments or questions about mysticism? I'm kind of at a loss at this point.
Um,
I just want to know how the hell do they draw from this shit?
I know, man. Well, have you heard Sadhguru's story? Um, he basically learned it by just watching the ants, he said. So when
Interesting.
he was a kid, his father and mother wanted him to grow up to be a doctor. He said, like every kid in India is supposed to grow up to be a doctor or an engineer or something like that. And he said he just wasn't with it. He just liked to daydream. So instead of in school, instead of focusing on class or his reading material, he would just daydream. And then after work, he would get a stick and he would go out, and instead of doing his homework, he would just observe ants all day long. And he says, I learned so much from them ants. Them ants taught me everything I know, man. And he said now he just he just practices the ants. He just observes things, and from that he's learned how to have these transcendental states. So I don't know. Let's go look at some ants.
Um, okay. I think I'm gonna watch the Cheech and Chong movie.
Yeah. Which one? Up in Smoke?
No, what the hell is it called here? I haven't seen this one. It was the last one they ever made. Hold on, I'm pulling it up. Far Out, man.
Far Out, man. I think I remember that. Was that about an alien or a UFO or something?
I don't know, but it's got this big black guy in it that wanted to test the Coke, and it was cut with some kind of like, I don't know, bullshit. And the black guy went nuts.
Mm.
So it's got to be, well, it's Cheech and Chong. You know, it's going to be just nothing but laughter.
Oh yeah.
And, but yeah, one thing about our little mystics, though, we gotta hold them and pet them and love them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man.
They're just the best. They make every time you go around them, they make you happy.
And that's the key. All right, man. I'm gonna get off here. It's about been on for 3.5 hours. I gotta go get something to eat.
Yes, sir. Hit that bathroom.
Same.
Yeah, man. Y'all have a good one, man. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe to the channel, audience. If you haven't
Y'all
already.
See it.
See ya. Have a good one.